terrain that will feed the narrative for those players.
Your character gains an experience, develops specific powers.
Yeah, we had like 28 players in the siege, and it was like, 18 feet long.
Players all over the world to literally fight over the same campaign map at the same time.
Rules for players exploring a labyrinth.
Because when we had to face the God Beast, we were all powered up.
There's not enough love stories in Age of Sigmar.
The Maw Crusher mating grounds.
Welcome, finally, to a new episode of the Filthy Casual Neon podcast. We've been in a bit of a break because there was so much narrative gaming going on around the world. Like, we were working on it. Today with me is Keegan West, and we'll talk about running some narrative games and events and how are people doing it around the world. Grab a drink, sit back, do some hobby, and enjoy some chilled out brainstorming on how to run the coolest events that the game has to offer.
In this podcast, we talk about playing in and running narrative events for Age of Sigmar, where to find them, how to play them, and how to run them yourself. The Neon is a decentralized community of gamers and event organizers who come together to compare notes, collaborate on projects, share ideas, and recruit people to play more narrative games. We have a website and a Facebook group, and we're active on Twitter.
Yep.
Go to wearetheneon.com and check out the menu there. We've got a variety of helpful articles on running events, and again, like those event packs. Send us feedback, send us submissions, send us upcoming events that you want to share with the world.
Yep,
we'll put them on the blog.
We'll put them on the blog. We'll talk about them in the podcast. That's what it's for. All right, this is the episode where we talk about attending a narrative event for the first time, for those of you who haven't, and what to expect. We have an interview with Dan Summerbell on his experience joining the narrative scene in the UK. But first, me and Keegan will have a look at what's been happening in organized narrative play during 2021. It's a lot of stuff has happened. So Keegan is also a narrative event organizer, or NEO for short. He's joining me all the way from Thailand, and he's the webmaster of the Great Weave platform, where people can host their original lore and characters or even run their own campaigns. Welcome, Keegan. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So this year we've been busy.
Yeah, it's been very busy this year.
It's been very busy, which is good.
Considering how locked down we are.
It's true. I mean, it's helped a lot in reinventing things. Ever since last year, a lot of people started doing a lot more online stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's been very interesting. But now people have started running all events of all sorts live again.
Yeah, it's been nice to see. I can't attend them, but it is nice to see from afar. Live vicariously through Twitter feeds.
But it's also good because it gives us ideas on things to do, because they're tinkering away with new things to try, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think there's a lot more people also tuning into it, and the mega battles apparently are now a thing. People want to do mega battles.
I'm also thinking about doing a mega battle.
Oh, look at that! There you go.
And also just a table that kills people. Apparently that's a thing too. I want to try that out. I'm building one right now. A table
that kills people?
Yeah. After the Holy Havoc crowd, I like the idea of a dangerous table. So
I think environmental effects is where it's at.
Yeah, environmental effects. Yeah, I think it's gonna look good. So.
No, I think that there's a lot for us to kind of just absorb, and I've been itching with ideas. I'm actually planning something with some local folks, which is still under wraps, so I can't say anything. We're still finalizing the deal, but it's gonna be something early next year here in here around the Massachusetts area in the US. But yeah, we're having a lot of ideas, and the problem is that you have more ideas than you'd like, because you need to you need to pick a few, otherwise you overwhelm your players. So there's a lot to be said. All right, so let's have a bit of a look of some of the things that have happened in the meantime this year. We've had a number of live play and online events. So yes, this is now a thing that happens in the Age of Sigmar community, is that we have online events and live play events.
That differentiate at this point between live play and online. So
you can still have like an element of live play, but essentially the games you play contribute to a campaign online.
Right. Yeah.
That you play with people from all across the world. And I guess they existed before, but COVID really changed everything.
It does seem like we've got a lot more people online contributing to some sort of plot or story or arc or, you know, something online. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think we definitely have to thank the Animosity team and you with a great weave for literally kind of showing this is how it's done, folks. You can do it too.
Yeah.
So, and that's something that, you know, the Great Weave supports fully, like your platform allows everyone to do that.
Hopefully, yeah.
So let's see. So this is just a smattering of some of the bigger events that have happened around the world of several narrative events with you know 20 plus people, I believe, each. And it's been great to see this. And some of them are from, you know, established narrative crowds that have attended other previous events. Some of these are people doing it for the first time. They may be tournament organizers already, but they had never done something narrative at this scale. And others are just veteran powerhouses of narrative events like Holy Havoc. And yeah, it's been a very busy year.
Yeah, I mean, that Whitney crowd has matching t-shirts, so they must know what they're doing. That was my time.
Yeah, but this is the thing, it's the touch, right? You know, the t-shirts are not that expensive. So if you can do it just sends completely the, you know, the proper, you know, we're organized. We're Neos.
Yeah. We're definitely not making up rules as we go.
Definitely not. That's also a thing that some people feel. I think they have a lot more preference for pre-prepared things, and other people really like to do stuff on the fly. The trick is your players must never know which one.
Yeah, as long as they just don't know. Yeah.
And online campaigns we have several. I mean, we have the monstrous Animosity campaign with 150 people this time.
It was so big.
And 400 people in the Discord. It was so big.
It was insane. Actually, I think the community has to have a robust conversation about how we manage that. If it continues its growth arc, we're gonna have some serious problems 2 years from now, where we've got like 1,000 players.
I'm glad for your optimism. I hope so. You know, with more GMs, you can do more managing. It really depends on. I think the public channels where everyone's talking in the same place can be more difficult to manage, but yeah, Animosity was huge, and the amount of work that was done in the lore and the updating and the background and the artwork. Oh man, we're gonna show you guys this. And then we had your very own, the Vormtai campaign, which I had the pleasure to participate. And it was great. I did so many games here at home. And I got to send my own Path to Glory army to do things in your campaign. So they've gained things that are now living in the Great Weave and in my army, because you made them a reality.
That's good. Good to hear.
And Ricky Smith ran the Shadow Marsh campaign. So it's a continuation of something that I started previously last year. And this was a dark, gritty campaign.
Nice and gritty. Everything had a vignette on it.
I love the mood that he set for this. And then we have Path to Glory Discovery from Narrative Labs, which is still ongoing, also in collaboration with the Great Weave, where they're doing a lot of live streamed games, and we're literally finding clues while the games are happening. So let's have a look at, before we have a look at all these things, though, just to show some of the things that are upcoming, and some of them are right around the corner. We didn't manage to get this out on time before all these events start popping up. So at the New Orleans Open, there's going to be some narrative elements in the Age of Sigmar GT, and the crowd there is, they are developing already a storyline that they want to continue for like bigger narrative events later in other opens that will happen later next year. And Shorehammer, which is run by Pimpcron, also has a number of narrative battles, especially big multiplayer battles. And this apparently is something that they've been doing for a while. And it's both, they have 40K, but also AOS. And this is something that's going to be really cool, I think. And the LVO, veteran Neo Bill Costello is running the Oasis of Flame. And last year's was very successful in 2020. No. Yes, it was in 2020. It wasn't last year. Last year we were full in lockdown. The one in 2020 was very, very successful, and he's doing it again. And so, I think it's already sold out or something. So yeah, they're very successful. The frontline gaming folks are really are enjoying that people are running narrative, and they're doing a good job.
Yeah.
So, what do we got? So the narrative crowd in the UK has been growing, with Realms at War being so successful, and some other events from affiliate and folks that they know there. Phil and Charles decided to spin off something from one of their own narratives that started into a full-blown event called, the events are called WitneyWarhammer, and this was the Secrets of the Norig. And they took a part of the Akshi map. So this is the part of the map of Akshi where the Stormcast first landed. This Fort Ignis.
And yeah. I'm looking at my map. I've got a map next to me, so I'm not looking at it.
Oh, the man has a map in his living room. Oh, wow.
Well,
Awesome.
It's a gaming room, but yes, yeah, I have the Soulbound one, yeah. Fancy.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, so that's the area. That's where the Stormcast and Valdez Hammerhand first landed. This is the location, and they set up a number of places here, and they each of the places had a table that was associated with it, and they essentially set a number of secrets and clues, so players had to actually find out what was happening. The games they won and the things they did in the games was all to find clues, and the only way to win the event was to figure out what was happening. What is the secret of the Norig?
Oh right, yeah. Hence the name that I'm only just now putting together. Oh yeah, okay, there we go.
So what I gathered from folks and what Dan Summerbell has told us is that this was it. They had to put a lot of stuff together because it was like all scattered pieces, and nobody knew what was going on. And there's a lot of skullduggery and cloak and dagger stuff going on. So the two teams, the players were split into two teams, and they had essentially two team leaders, which was Steve Foot and Ollie Grimwood. And Steve Foot reprised his role as Lord Dracothfoot from Realms at War. And Olrog, Ollie has been playing in Realms at War as well in other events as Olrog, and now he's become a full-fledged faction leader. And they showed up in costume. This must have been insane, man. This is so hilarious. And so they even had like miniatures for each of them. So these tables, the tables they got, I think they had some help of the folks from Realms at War as well. So they managed to put a lot of tables of terrain.
Yeah. Can you imagine having terrain like this? Like, I gotta say, running an event, if you've got terrain, it's a lot. It adds a lot. It makes a lot of things easier.
I completely subscribed. And the answer to your question, yes, I have imagined. I constantly imagine it.
I go to sleep imagining if I had more possessing mills terrain, yes.
I'm slowly getting to it, and I'm running out of space at home to store it, but I keep working towards it slowly. I think that theirs is a very high quality. my motto is always that you can make very interesting tables by very cheap, by either using what your store has or putting your terrain that you already own in a clever, interesting way, instead of just like, let's scatter 4 pieces or 6 pieces in your table. And I want to see you reprise your Clouds air table, your cotton air table. That was amazing.
It's still around. I mean, I've got the cotton ready for the next one.
Oh, you saved it. All right, nice.
I saved it. I tore apart our cushions to get to it. So my wife, when she saw it, was like, "Well, you're going to use this again." I'm like, okay.
Oh yeah, no, don't attack more pillows, please.
Yeah, she's like, "You better not take more of the pillows." Yeah.
So Phil and Charles kind of, they made an entire storyline where Phil played like one of the he made like an NPC that was played by himself, like Mayor Ulf Kywin of one of the towns in the location, and people did the newspapers are now a thing. We need to thank Realms at War and Dan Summerbell and for starting the whole newspapers, because now it's like people are doing newspapers Animosity, people are doing newspapers in Discovery.
Yeah,
it's hilarious. They're very good. Yeah, so
here's
propaganda
works well for communicating things.
Yes, I think so. I think so. I think it's a great idea. And there you go. There's the Lord Dracofoot's miniature. She was actually somewhere in the battle as well.
Super cool.
And they had like, the secret meetings that only the team would gather to discuss the clues they had.
Oh yeah, that's good.
No, it's good. They booked the whole venue and they made sure they all had masks and everything. So this was earlier this summer. And now going across the pond here in the US. So Neil LaRocca was already known as a TO that ran an amazing tournament with really awesome terrain. And Aaron had already told me that he felt he was playing in a narrative event in his tournaments because the terrain was just so cool. So he this time just went full narrative, and his player pack was intense. A lot of moving pieces. So he had treachery cards. He had a custom general that evolved in a number of upgrades. It wasn't Anvil of Apotheosis. He made his own, and you could like dig for different things in different tables and gain different types of resources. If you are looking for ideas for events, find this pack. We have it. We should have it. If we don't have it yet, we'll have it soon on the website. Go dig through his pack. It's full of ideas for you. There's so many things there. It looks so good, and he's gonna keep doing it. He's told all his players that when this happens again, the next event will happen again. The same generals can keep accruing points throughout all the events. That's gonna be fun.
That. I mean, I'm biased to that kind of thing, obviously, but I do like that.
Yeah, man. There was a lot. So everyone had to have like their special narrative character that got upgraded in this way. That here's just a smattering of them. This is like a third of them or less. You might recognize Teyrathi from Strength Hammer fame.
Yeah.
So Chuck Moore is he's one of the locals of this crowd, and so he brought Teyrathi once again. So it's a very, very long running narrative character.
Yeah.
In our community. And there you see like the tables that he has. Like he has an amazing Caradron table that is at his home that he actually doesn't use in his events. It's like a floating castle in the sky hanging from the ceiling. And yeah, that's not a table. That's not a table that he games in. That's his home table. It's so beautiful. And he did like a gladiatorial combat between the custom narrative heroes as part of the event. So they had like a few of these arenas set up so players could just all like smash each other's face. Still in the US, so mega battles are now becoming popular. You've told me you want to run one of your own soon, right?
Yeah, well, we're in a space now that it's possible to put 3 tables next to each other. So I'm like, no, should we do it? Again, not to undersell the amount of effort that goes in, but it's not like the end of the world to just stick 3 tables together and put all the terrain on the board and say, we start at 8 a.m. and finish when we finish, that sort of thing. That just seems something that would be really cool to do at least once a year, twice a year.
Yeah, I think other people that have ran mega battles have told me that this is something that they do regularly, and it should become more of a staple, to be honest. So Kyle is very involved down in the Houston area in the match play scene, and they do a lot of stuff down there. And he's also an author of the fan battle tome of the Cult of the Dragon for Slaves to Darkness. You might have seen that around, and he has this big converted Archeon on a dragon, not Dorgar. And he decided we're going to do a mega battle, and it's going to be a narrative mega battle. So there's a number of, this is the era of the beast that we're now. So there's a number of totems around the board where they could try to summon Kragnos to the battlefield. So this was full narrative, and it was explicit in the pack, and yeah, they had a lot of fun on this. It seemed like they brought everything that was huge to this battle, and it where else can you bring your cool big stuff that sometimes is not efficient in a list, right? Sometimes you say, I'm just going to bring the coolest thing that I got, even if my list is not efficient, because somebody else will be playing next to me. So you kind of counterbalance each other's weaknesses too. I think that's something that there's a lot to play with. We may be seeing like a shift in how the game is played if this keeps going.
Yeah, it is nice to see people pulling out their fancy stuff.
Yes. You say fancy stuff because it's expensive and from Forge World?
No, I mean fancy stuff as in they have it, but they never put it on the table because it's not like crazy efficient.
Yes.
It's like not leading edge. But I must admit, I also like seeing Forge World things on the table. That does look cool.
No, it's good.
Things that are on the table. I'm kind of interested in those as well.
No, I mean, like, the Dread Saurian, the Mammoth. I've seen there was someone that brought 3 mammoths to the Nova Open. Emma.
What?
Yes. Emma Mangels plays at the Nova Open, and she had, I think, 1 mammoth, and then she brought 3. and she could field 2 in the list, and then the 3rd was for the siege, and it was so beautiful to see. So beautiful.
Oh, that's
I mean, it's worth it. It's so worth it.
It's big.
Now, the big one. What do you have to say about animosity, Keegan? I'm biased because I was part of the team. What do you have to say about animosity?
Animosity this year almost buried me. Like I so big.
Oh, this almost buried me.
You know what I really liked? What I really liked about it this year as well was the quality of storytelling took a notch up. I like that. Literally as a filmmaker, it's literally my job. It was nice to see the storytelling really go full tilt. The art was great. We had like a lot more artwork. We had a lot more maps. We had a lot more intrigue and things like that. But it was also really nice to see, just the storytelling take a leap up. I really appreciated that.
No, it was. I think last year was essentially the training wheels. Like, we were teaching people how to do this, so we had enough people that knew already what this was going to be about, and then a lot more new people joined, who were then explained by these people that already been there.
Right.
And so for those who don't know what animosity is, this is an online campaign where people can participate through playing games, doing hobby, doing drawings, doing voiceover audio dramas, and short story writing. So a lot of people got to exercise their creative skills, a lot of writing especially. In essentially each of these submissions counted 1 point for your team, and your team had choices to make. They could put points in different decisions to move the story forward, and they're always clashing with another team. So there were 6 coalitions, and they were always clashing with somebody else in a different person in a different team in each of the decisions they made. And then they were thrown into this plot where they had a fight for the throne of a secluded kingdom somewhere in the edge of the realm of light, ruled by elves, all backstabbing each other. That's it. That was Animosity 3. And it was mad. A lot of strong emotions. And
We really got into it this year. Yeah.
oh man, and the plot. This is the thing. The whole thing is enriched by what players contribute, because the players bring the locations that the team created to life.
Right.
It was amazing to see, like, the Las Vegas crowd like really gathered a lot of players into Animosity, and there were so many different submissions in different parts of the story.
Yeah.
Right, we give them a prompt, and people kind of gather what they have at home, and they put their miniatures together. And you also see recurring characters. So Alflef Bugmansburg is now a character in our Soulbound game post Wormtide campaign.
Yeah.
This is a character from Lichcast, and she's we're working for her. My character is working for this character now. we just jumped off her airship. She gave us a ride to the destroyed city, and we jumped off. So this is like moved on from the Animosity 3 location, and they're somewhere else, but they're still the same characters. And yeah, so players did more newspapers. It's people are now bit debate. People bit debate, and they just use the newspapers just like slander, cranked up to 11.
Right. They're like, okay, this is artistic slander at this point. This is good. I get I get to say what I want, but if I put it in newspaper form, no one will tell me no. Exactly.
And we had so many people kind of exercising like drawing skills and stuff, and even like digital drawing skills. I was blown away by this.
Yeah, people went all out.
So good. Some of them were really, really good, and some people like really went into the role play inside the
specific channels.
Specific channels, and the love stories, my friend. There was a love story going on as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I missed that one.
Yeah, there was a love story. There was one player character that was there was one player character that was in love with an NPC. And then there was a player character that had 2 characters that were essentially getting married during the event. And then there was an actual marriage ceremony in the event that was essentially ruined because of the players' decisions. And a lot of people are upset about that.
A lot of people were upset about that. Yeah.
Oh, man. And just the quality of the hobby. People like painted like new stuff and like made like battle scenes. Excuse me. And we were also we might have seen this one around. So Martin Orlando's Crimson Dawn army was introduced, at least to us, for the first time during Animosity 3. All these Lumineth elves. Yeah, man, this was big, and it was a lot of people, like 150 people playing throughout the whole event, and like 400 people in the Discord. And several of them are now our buddies in either playing Great Weave campaigns or Narrative Labs.
Yeah.
Now down in Las Vegas, so we need to explain to people about these guys. Like, if you are interested in how do I start a new local group of players, and how do I get people involved in narrative, well, you talk to these guys. So Anthony and Naro, they are literal powerhouses. So Naro moved to Las Vegas like a couple years ago, year and a half or something, and he decided, I want to play narrative. So he already knew a few other Neos, and he realized they both love match play, but they felt, you know what, you can't play match play all the time. Narrative is just fun. Let's do this. Let's give a different offering because you can be more creative. And he got in touch with Anthony, and Anthony, I think, was already planning on doing something like this. So they gather together. They each like have a different store that they go more to. Each of them have like a group of like 15, 20 people
Right.
that they all kind of grab together to run narrative. And they just like pump out a number of events. It's amazing. I've never seen. They have an amazing terrain trove. Like, you know, they've ran the Uncharted Crusade, which is like an entire map where you could control stuff. There was an event that Naro was going to run, but there weren't enough people showing up because it was still half lockdown ish. And I wish it had gone forward, because the stuff that he's got prepared. So they like to do a lot of these random table events that affect all the tables.
Oh yeah.
The Neo's Hand of Doom, he calls it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, he's the master of like, and Naro is like the master of environmental effects, and like, how can you create an interesting effect with a simple rule? So he actually advocates that the campaign structure and the rules you put are not, maybe are more important than the terrain itself, which is kind of like, you know, this sort of.
Yeah, it's a balancing act there.
Is a balancing act. I think a lot of narrative players, we put a lot of emphasis on terrain. I include myself in this, but I like that he says I think it's the other way around. I think you need to give people the narrative has to emerge from the mechanics.
Yeah, that's definitely one way of doing it. That's for sure. Yeah, I think I would probably. We don't actually have a lot of terrain where I'm at, so we also don't really put like a lot into stock into the terrain. I think that's probably why I get so interested on the Twitter feeds, because I'm like, oh my god, look at all that cool stuff. Yeah, the mechanics are definitely. I mean, that's really good. I mean, that's putting a lot more effort than I ever do. I just sort of make it up as I go along. But
well,
I do like the GM kind of thing where you're sort of interacting with the story as you go. That's really, there's something special about that. So if you're doing that through like environmental effects, or you're doing that through Hand of Dooms or whatever, I mean, that's so unique, and you can't really do that in any of the other formats. So
no,
yeah.
Naro said that he's been running a number, like a long running campaign format where he's taken each of the Broken Realms books, and he's essentially taken the battle plans and he adapted them to match play battle plans, because he's essentially been converting a match play crowd.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, folks, this is what we're talking about. How do you take a match play crowd and you get them to play narrative without them being afraid?
Without them freaking out like their lives are about to end. Yeah.
Yeah, he managed to essentially.
How will I ever get through this game if I don't? Yeah.
No, he's done something amazing, because he's managed to take the rules that were published. That's what you were saying. Like, you know, it's a lot more work unless you actually take the rules that have already been published, because we sometimes try to reinvent the wheel too much. Me included.
You don't put that much effort into it. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think he's been running. He's been going through the Broken Realms story through playing a number of games and just bringing the story to life through the environmental effects and the battle plan rules.
I like that.
And apparently, what they're doing. Sorry.
And it looks like he's got pins and maps. That's
what I was gonna say. So he's saying that this is gonna be a sort of a collectible. Every event that they're gonna run, there's gonna be a pin. And then you can, when you show up, if you have a lot of pins from other events, you get a bonus.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so they're badges. Yeah. No, they've put a lot of thought into this.
I wish Discord had badges like that. Some way to track like participation in events.
Are you trying to gamify my social media, Keegan?
It would be so cool.
I thought we were already there. I thought they had badges.
They've got badges for things that you don't, for Discord things.
I see. Oh, I see what you mean.
Internal server badges.
I see.
Little, that would just be so cool. I've thought of doing like a little emoticons on people's, names, but then at some point it gets kind of crazy.
You should talk to Alex. You should talk to Alex, because the way he's doing it in Animosity is the more Animosity events you've attended, at least the oldest one, because I think there's levels of it, your name is a different color.
Oh yes.
Yeah, that might be what you want. I think the more events you've attended, your color is a different hue.
That could work. Yeah, that could work. I like that. I like that idea.
And once again, the mega battle. So this was also organized by Anthony and Naro, and they just like put together a big siege mega battle, not lengthways this time, but with the fortress in the middle being attacked from both sides. And this was just massive. This kind of like came a bit out of nowhere, and they said, yeah, we're running this. Like, really already? But that's the thing, a mega battle doesn't take as much work.
Yeah. Is again, like, you don't want to like diminish the amount of work that goes into it, but at the same time, it's not the same as these really involved, intricate events. It's not really the same kind of amount of work. So yeah, it seems like they're easier to put on. Yes.
And I can never stop looking at this image here and think of the Monty Python French in the castle.
Yeah.
Insulting.
Sure.
Insulting the guys outside.
Plus the pictures always look amazing from these battles. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, and folks, you can find all of these rules in the Neon website, because they've put the rule set together, so you can try to run something similar on your own gaming group. They had quite a number of involved rules where, like, depending how far the attackers got to the center of the castle.
Oh, I like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Stolen.
And oh, hello, who's this person? Who's this pretty face? So this is the Vormtai campaign. This was run by you, and I had a blast. I participated in this. I had a blast doing this. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun doing it.
Yeah, this is all very secretive, because I thought, oh my god, he's running this right so soon after Animosity, and it was big, way bigger than I thought it was going to be. Big in terms of the scope and the scale of the stuff you threw at us.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, I wanted something big. I mean, we're supposed to be in Gur, and yeah. Plus, we'd just come out of Animosity with all the sort of like backstabby intricacies. And I was like, okay, the elves were lovely, but what happens if we just have like a mountain? Whatever, just really different. Yeah.
It's interesting that what people remember from Animosity is just all the backstabbing.
So much backstabbing, so much politics.
Oh man,
we did it great. So we had some politics in Vormtai, which was kind of fun. So
oh, you did, and so my wife was playing for the Order Coalition. She told me it was one single severe backstabbing. It was very important.
Yeah, there was a big one. There was a few actually, but yes, I didn't know that one.
I have to say, dude, the quality of the artwork really helps.
Yeah, so I've got I run a media studio, so I cheated and I asked one of my artists to help me out. So he's great. He's lovely. Yeah.
I mean, you leverage what you got to get transferable skills, right?
Okay.
You leverage what you got. Now, I'm saying this because I noticed when we were publicizing this that putting this as the advertising picture,
right,
helped get a lot of clicks. It makes the difference.
It looks really different as well. Like it has a like it looks like Warhammer, but maybe only because it has the word Warhammer on it. And then aside from that, you're like, well, it just looks really different. Like, who are these people, and how do they fit in? And I think that always kind of helps a lot.
And
so,
they don't look generic.
Aesthetic in there, like everyone's got like fur and coats and little skulls and things like that. So the next campaign that we run, which will be in a different realm, will look different. But I wanted them to look really unique. So yeah.
It works really well. Exactly, they look unique. They don't look generic. They look interesting, immediately interesting.
Yeah.
So now I'm continuing in a campaign that is a spin-off from Vormtai. So now working for Beliana, because she's the mayor.
Yeah, like, is it a spoiler alert? No, it can't be a spoiler alert because you can't really do it because it's finished. But yeah, so she's alive. She lived. So yeah.
Wait, was there a chance that she could die? Oh
yeah. I mean, she could have died. Yeah. I mean, we have a similar rule. We had similar rules with Animosity. Like, you just can't off, because there's always that scare of a soulbound crew just being like, okay, let's off the head of one of the leaders. So they weren't really super touchable, but that is one nice thing that's been a little bit. It is nice being a little bit smaller because you can really get involved. If someone comes to you and says, "Listen, I have this idea. I really want to do this thing," you're like, "Okay, why not?" We almost had. I mean, we had the whole of the destruction team kind of almost self-implode at one point when they tried to take over. So it was interesting.
Yeah, there were secrets that I didn't know. We're like what, like 4 players or so per team, something like that.
It wasn't a lot, yeah. I think the biggest team probably had 7 or 8, and then the smallest team only had 4.
It's always Order that has the biggest team, right? Or was Destruction?
I think Destruction had the most,
man.
actually. Yeah, Chaos really struggled this time. Chaos, like, they barely got through.
Yeah, so the place where you decide to set this, like you had already generated this location like a good number of months before, like this city that is in the back of 2 god beasts on a very predictable migratory pattern.
Yeah, so it's one god beast that stays still, and then the other god beast like hits it, deflects, comes back around, hits it, deflects. So we actually made it for a narrative Underworlds campaign. So it's an Underworlds campaign. So all of the map itself is actually a I mean, I removed the hexagonal from the artwork, but it's actually hexagonal. And then as the players play more games, they take over sections of it, and then they unlock new cards that they can then put into their deck. So they start with a really tiny deck, like a really small deck, like an illegal deck of 5 cards, I think. And then they slowly add to their collection over time. So we had already played on the area. We'd already sort of like looked at it, but not from like a character perspective. So we didn't know who ruled the city, etc. But we did know like the fact that the city itself is split in half. So half the city is on one beast and the other half is on the other. And you sort of cross over as the beasts collide, because why not?
Dude, this is like, this should go in a battle tome or something. This is it. It's so great. Cool. It's so insane. It's very Warhammer. It's very Realm of Beasts.
Yeah, it is insane. Don't think too hard about how it actually happens. Because it was fun.
It was a lot of fun, dude. Like, I can't believe you've managed to narrativize Underworlds. Well done. That's awesome. Like,
that was a real mission. I mean, it's kind of my goal to sort of make narrative versions of every kind of system.
Yeah.
So Underworlds was definitely up there. Like, okay, we got to figure out a way to do that. So
yeah, no, it's interesting because it's a game that is meant to be like, it's very solid in its match play kind of, competitiveness. Like, this is the game.
Right.
Good. That's not a lot of people are doing that. It is awesome. That's a good idea. There you go, folks. Some ideas for you.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I really like your quest system, the way you do things in the Great Weave. So this is all using the Great Weave platform. So this is essentially you showing us how can you run an online campaign for your players, or even just an online running the online element of your local campaign.
Yeah,
you could do that. It's essentially you put up quests and people essentially submit to the quest to advance the story in that direction.
Yeah, the idea is that it's as open-handed as you physically can get. So the idea was, what is a platform that is easy to input for an organizer to create, and then on the other end, how to make it as easy as possible to reply or to submit, or whatever vernacular you're using, but then also have it as broad as you physically can get it. So you could, in theory, run whole events from a single quest, or you could run an event with multiple quests on the one end of the scale. On the other end of the scale, it's just a game. You could run a quest, like as a local NEO, you could just write story ideas and turn them into quests, and then people can pick or choose and then just play a game. And the nice thing is that you could do it from anywhere in the world. So if you really like writing stories, you could just write a whole bunch of different quests, and then people on the other side of the world can take that, play a game, and then resolve the story So it's supposed to be as open-ended as it physically can get. So that was the idea. And then for me, for Vermintide, was very much a play testing area for me, was trying to do what I've been encouraging people to do myself, and then sort of play test it and sort of iron out all the wrinkles. So that was basically what Vermintide did, was iron out a lot of the technical back end things that are kind of
I think even the way it was already set up, the fact that, for each quest, if you wanted to submit to that quest, you essentially go to the page and you add a comment, which is very straightforward type of interface. You add a comment, and then I put my links to my Twitter post where I had my pictures of the game I played. So it connects to social media immediately. So I get to advertise your campaign. I get to put my stuff out there, and it connects to the right page of the quest. I will even say, though, you say this is open-ended. I think that's better, because somebody's going to take this. Somebody's going to take the platform and the way it works and going to use it in a way that you've never predicted.
Well, that's kind of what's happening already. Yeah, it's kind of insane. I think that for me, I might be diverting the conversation at this point, but that for me is what this year really changed, was the format of what online play looked like. Now, maybe that's just because we didn't actually do as much in the past, but now with so many different people doing so many different formats, it's kind of insane. I mean, we've got like not just Twitch streaming, but like the interactivity with the narrative. It's really late at night. It's midnight for me here. It's a narrative games. No.
Narrative Labs.
Narrative Labs. Oh my goodness. Don't be mad at me, Narrative Labs. The Narrative Lab guys. I mean, that's a really unique format. And then we've got like Ricky doing the Twitter thing. That's a really unique format. And then we've got Discord, sort of Path to Glory things. That's a really unique one. And then we've got the YouTube format. So they're all like really different ways to interact with players. So they're all online, they're all narrative, but the submission way, or the way to interact with players, is really, really different and really, really unique. That is what I think 2021 has been all about. We've just seen an explosion, not in just narrative gaming, but the format in which players interact with NEOs. That's been just crazy. So my goal was that no matter what kind of format you wanted to play, you would be able to do it through the Weave. If you wanted to do it on the Weave, you could. So whether it's a podcast, there's another one with the podcast with the Path to Glory guys. It's just
I mean, it's out there, folks. Like, reach out, check out the website, and it's like you said, it's very open-ended. And even when a campaign ends, like the aftermath of your Vermintide campaign, this is now ongoing. I'm playing in a Soulbound campaign that is essentially following this quest, the rebuilding of Nasalotl. We're essentially jumping off an airship into the destroyed city to try to reclaim it. We just fended off a megalofin that was somehow infested with spiders.
Because why not? Because that's the crazy thing, right? Like, I mean, so I'm biased, right? Obviously, I like the Weave, but obviously, but I do like the fact that it's sort of ongoing. So, like, okay, so as an example, you've got an Underworlds campaign that sets up an environment, right? And then you've got an event that uses that environment to push the story along. They then destroy half the city, which is on the back of a god beast, and that's a whole thing.
As you do.
And now you've got a Soulbound campaign that took existing players that were in animosity, might I add, and then puts them in a Soulbound group that now is reclaiming the destroyed city from that event that started with the Underworlds campaign. It's just sort of like blows my mind. It's so cool. I mean, again, I'm super biased, but I mean, that was one thing that, again, because I wanted to show off what you could physically do. Part of that was showing, hey, just because the event's finished doesn't mean you have to stop interacting with the players and the environments. So yeah, I have nothing to do with the aftermath sequence. I don't do anything with it. Another person has gone off and said, I like the setting, I like this environment, I'm gonna play a solve, and just gone off with it. That's amazing. I was telling you earlier, I want to do a local, not an event, just a local game, just a single game to sort of resolve one of the quests to exercise the serpent, which is a quest that came from just a single player, like a single player in the event, just kept giving me the craziest responses to quests, like really random left field responses, and I always had to like integrate them somehow. And yeah, I mean, he infested the city with what he called the purple serpent.
Yeah, so this was the other part. It was 2 god beasts and a giant worm that passed between them, where
yeah.
the Dawnbringer's mission was to essentially settle the worm as a new free city. Welcome to Warhammer.
Right.
So I remember, I played a game against my wife where I was besieging the new settlement and she was defending it. And we were literally on top of the worm. That was the narrative. And only later, after we were besieging it, we later learned of the treachery of the cultists.
Yeah,
and
right.
They just blew open a rift kind of everywhere. And then as you wrapped up the story, like the cultists stayed there in this new city as the worm crawled away.
Yeah. So the new settlement in the city has sort of this cult sort of situated in it, nice and secretive as they like it, which is great. You can hopefully run with it, whether that's a soulbound campaign or an event or a game. Doesn't matter to me. So
I think that's actually one of the most powerful things in the Weave. If you want to run an event, visit the Great Weave, look for story hooks.
Yeah,
because it's quite likely that these story hooks are not just a random thing. Every single, either you created them or another player created them, and you can go and ask, can I follow this through? Can I use this? I'm actually going to use one of yours for one of my events, and I've already talked to the player that was starting to interact with it. It's pure coincidence. He's an Nurgle player down in the lava tubes of Hammer Hall. And you said that there was a Nurgle infestation in the lava. I don't know how that happens, but somehow let's make it true. So I already talked with him, and I said, like, I want to get you involved in the collaborative story writing of our next event following that story.
Super cool. Yeah.
I think that the story hooks, the collaborative story hooks, are the best part.
Yeah. Yes. If you're listening to this and you want to make more, because we need
exactly.
it.
Yeah, it's the perfect place to put like short stories and everything that you want to create. I love it, and it looks so pretty, man. The website is very pretty. So something a bit more recent, and maybe some of you have heard about this. So this is the big original narrative event, Holy Havoc and Holy Wars, the Holy Events by Stephen Herner. These were the ones that started all. So the things this man does with his terrain tables have literally taught us all everything. And this is the A-list event. Like, so many people here, so many of the podcasters and the YouTubers of Age of Sigmar, they're all there.
Content creators. Yeah.
And it's amazing. So this is the tournament where the tables want to kill you. That's probably, the tables are beautiful, but they want to kill you. There's lots of special effects going on. Each table has like a specific battle plan. There's like every table has a specific thing you need to do in it. That's story going on in the table. And
so everyone's playing the same battle plan in our new vernacular, right? But each table is introducing another layer of just insaneness. So
yes. And Stephen changes these from year to year, so that they kind of stay fresh, and introduces a few new tables, and he raffles off some of the old ones, so you can get to take a table home if you have a truck, I guess.
Somehow.
So these are all kind of like textured terrain tables with lots of like special terrain, and these are like some of these are 7 years or older, and they're beautiful. And he has the original floating tables terrain. Sorry, a floating islands terrain table.
Yeah.
Which, you know, it's AOS. You have to have floating islands. And yeah, everyone says they loved it, and you know, the tables are really the star of the place. And so this ice terrain, ice lake table is one of the more recent ones. And you know, each one of them has like all these special effects. And the other thing that Holy Havoc is and Holy Wars are very known for is the Warlord of Havoc. Each player, on top of their army for free, can take the Warlord of Havoc. So this was the custom character before the Anvil of Apotheosis. He's been doing this for many years and inspired several of us to do the same, way before Anvil of Apotheosis ever happened. And he's been refining his formula for ages. So he has like these stickers that he can put on the war scroll to upgrade your warlord, or now I think maybe now he uses checkboxes. And it has to be kit bashed. He says like it has to be a new creation of some sort. So people really go all out in the things they make, and you can give them different upgrades. So you can bring your warlord, and your warlord can be a specialist of something else. You know, they don't all have the same stats. They start with the same stats, but then you can bring specialties even as they start, and then they get upgrades.
Nice.
And that's the thing. It's something you're going to remember because that's a character you made for it. You know, like the Realms at War also done this. The Nova Open has also done this, and now, you know, with the Anvil of Apotheosis, anyone can do it.
Yeah, it looks cool.
No, it's very good. I need to go there at some point. We also have had another online campaign from Master Converter and Painter Ricky Smith. I mean, master everything. The man is a virtuoso. He makes rules, he paints, he hobbies, he writes lore.
Good-looking books, yeah.
Yes. So he's very well known for his custom battle tome of the Midnight City, which is an Ironweld Arsenal free city. And this campaign that he's ran the first acts of Shadow Marsh was last year, I believe. And it was connected to the Broken Realms narrative, and it was dealing with the fallout of Morathi's takeover of Envilgard. And there was a city that was essentially kind of, you know, we voted and ended up getting the city destroyed by contributing our creations on Twitter. So this is ran on Twitter. And so the city was destroyed, and the survivors of the city are now these outcasts. So they've ran away to Shimon, and they're in some sort of desolate region. And then he asked us, what are these people going to do? Make your army influence and tempt these people into what you want them to become. So they had to kind of pick through a number of choices, and then people submitted with the right hashtag on Twitter. So, and they were tempted by vampires, they were tempted by local warlords, they were tempted by the Midnight City to kind of become a new civilization, technologically advanced and ditching Sigmar for good. They all went with the vampires.
I was like, did they do any of those? No.
I think it got the majority of the votes almost every time. So all these survivors ended up committing to like the local vampire underlords in a refuge in the mountains, and they've built a new city that is just like serving the vampires or protected by them, something like that. Like we don't talk about Vampire Club, first rule. and people submitted their hobby. They painted stuff to kind of represent their submissions and, you know, to influence these poor bastards that are now this new city. I hope he does more with that, because it would be cool to at some point get to visit the place, like in an event, or be like the backdrop of a campaign.
Yeah.
No, it's really cool. I hope this continues. He's been doing an amazing work. And this is something we already talked about, the Narrative Labs Path to Glory Discovery campaign. So if you haven't seen it yet, Narrative Labs are a streaming group. They run live narrative AOS games on Twitch, which you can interact with, which I generally call, we get to mess with the game. You get to vote where endless spells go, you get to vote which special effect happens, we get to vote where the monster goes and stomp. stuff like that. And we essentially make the players' lives miserable. So Martin cooks this all up and has like his nice studio at home with all his terrain. He has amazing trove of terrain. And so Discovery is a campaign taking 3 of his players through this story in exploring the lost island of Consendia, which has been covered by mists. And his 3 players are essentially the team captains, and they get to play and they get to investigate the island. And we are essentially the inner circle of we the players around the world. We're the inner circle of advisors who we can play games and do hobby and other kind of stuff at home. And every one of those submissions counts as a chance to steal a clue from the other ones. And so his players are a blast. And you might recognize here Jamie the Jasper from Realm of Plastic, of name generator fame. Jamie's hilarious. They're so funny, man. They really put up a really good show. So I'm supporting King Alfonso and his delusional flesh eater courts, because we don't want this island to belong to either the Blood Knights or to the excremental herd of Beast Lord Grolger. So Jamie invented a beast herd that their only purpose is to do, what do they call the great ritual of defecation to impress Nurgle? Yes. So they're smearing poo everywhere. That's their goal.
Yeah, without being said, that's basically what's going on.
So I have a number of games that this has been running for a few weeks now. I have a number of games that I've played that I want to make submissions for them to steal a few more clues. We have no idea what happened to the island. Apparently, some Sylvaneth and humans have been killing each other and has been invaded. I can't say more because it's secret. I have no idea where this is gonna go, but I have like a few clues to kind of try to steal, and it's a lot of fun because before each game, Martin tells us, this is the table, these are the locations that can be searched, and they each have names. They're like, observatory, ruins of something, dead trees, and they actually exist on the table. So our team captain, the person who's actually playing, has to actually visit with their models that location on the table to gain that clue. And if you don't visit it, the clue is there for you to steal later or from another player. It's so different from everything else.
It's very, very unique. Yeah.
And he always has like these controlling where the endless spells go, so we can get to vote on that during the live stream. And yeah, I mean we have also propaganda, right? We have newspapers.
Yeah, of course.
That's one form of submission to try to influence things and steal clues. Now this is great. I mean, and they're probably going to do more. They've done a few campaigns before, but I think this is the first one that it's the most interactive of all. And of course they're in collaboration with the Great Weave, so this is functioning. The submissions are all through the Great Weave platform.
Yeah,
I think this is also an example for people to understand how to use the platform.
Yeah.
And yet another one with a collaboration with the Great Weave, the Dice Sagas crowd, the YouTube channel, they've now also started a campaign. They've been setting their stories in the interstice, which is a pocket realm where every time there's a realm gate malfunction, if a realm gate collapses, it dumps people in this interstice. So it grows by conglomerating, refuse of the void of the realms.
Yeah, kind of.
And
yeah.
You can get in and out, so you don't get stuck necessarily.
Again, don't think too hard about it. But yeah, basically, yeah.
But it's important that your characters don't get locked to a location. When you play Age of Sigmar, it's important that you don't always. Your characters must travel from realm to realm if you want to keep using them for different campaigns and events.
Yeah.
So what they have here is, after players have contributed to build the interstice that is already, it has a number of things that players created, including these two factions. They've decided, well, let's pick some and let's make them fight each other. So there's a big fight between a realm of elves in the interstice and a big herd of beasts of chaos. So Chris and Matt they've set this system where you, in the same way you make submissions and you vote on polls on their Discord channel to essentially decide what's going to happen next. So there's already a number of submissions out there submitted through the Great Weave, and depending on who you want to support, same way, you tell your story, you do your hobby, you write the story, you play a game, and you try to steer things one way or the other. And you can play in specific hexes that have special rules as well in each campaign turn. So you can bring the game to your table too. And I don't know, I mean, I know this is actually not the most up-to-date map. They've already destroyed some parts of the map.
Yeah, there's a new map. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're only fighting on a small part because this is like zoomed in some
Right.
part. So this is where the campaign takes place, but the interstice is bigger. So you can, if you want to play in the interstice, you can say, hey, I'm this person, I have this army, I want to make a city here, and they'll make a city for you.
Yeah.
That's how the
Yeah,
interstice
we
works.
played a whole Soulbound campaign down in the Ember Isle earlier this year, and it was great. It was just sort of like, okay, I'm going to take this whole section here. It's like, okay, it's fine. Yeah. In fact, there's a burning head rampaging right now through the Ember Isle because my Soulbound group let it go, let it loose, and then it just left. It was sort of like, do you want to solve this problem? Like, no,
Nah.
I'm just gonna let it go. It's like, okay.
See, this is how endless spells start.
Yeah, right.
You know,
It's just
those endless
out
spells
there.
that have a bounty on them. This is how they start. No, yeah, this is gonna be nice, and this is all in the Great Weave, so yet more hooks for people to start up with, and if you submit stuff for Dice Sagas, they will, if their backlog is not too full, they will make a community lore video for you where they'll make special effects and animate your miniatures and models and photo shoots with voiceover and everything, and they'll tell your stories that you write. Their production quality is very, very good.
They're very committed.
And so this is a small event that I attended locally, and I'm really glad they're back on it. So this is a Black Friday narrative here in Massachusetts, in the US. So this was the fight for the Blood Gullet Maw Path. You know, Heir of the Beast. There's a big vortex of beastly energy, and you know, folks are interested. You know, it's magical. It's got stuff for you. So we went down, and they have an amazing treasure trove of terrain. So Jack was running this, as a lot of the terrain was built also by Brian. So Brian was also a Coalescence alumnus that joined the narrative crowd, you know, a good number of years ago, and they together, like they put together really cool events, and now they're back on it, and I want to see if I can attend more of them. The pandemic kind of put a wrench on everything.
Yeah.
And yep, I was kind of saying, let's see what they got to offer. It got pretty much a bit of everything. You know, we got a special character that could do different things in a special part of the magic phase, like a sort of a phase that moved endless spells like crazy. We got cards for artifacts, and you know, we got to try to absorb this vortex at the end of the game. So the end of the game was a multiplayer battle where we had to grab the vortex. And they are playing this. Look at the space of this store. This is a huge store in kind of upstate Massachusetts. It's huge. You know, the folks there have been running a store for like a couple decades now, and you know, they now made a cafe. They sell ice cream. It's amazing. This store is like it has the same space as if you were to rent like a hotel ballroom to run a GT.
Yeah.
And they have an amazing terrain trove. So I don't need to organize a narrative event anymore. I can just join theirs. Yeah, I mean, I can just attend, and I don't need to kind of, you know, do the heavy hauling, because they got everything there. They have amazing terrain, and you know, they've done a lot of these special rule stuff before, so it's gonna be fun. So this is kind of a lot of the stuff that has happened, you know, things big and small, and you know, how you can kind of get ideas to do it yourself. And we also had two podcasts starting, two narrative podcasts for Age of Sigmar. One is Seriously Narrative from the folks who are in Maryland. They're a husband, wife, and daughter team. I met them when I went to the Nova Open Grand Narrative down in DC. And Matt is the one running the Grand Narrative right now. And he decided to let's have a podcast and talk about all these things. And it's really interesting because not only do they talk about playing narrative and how like they do logistics in their club, they also do narrative readings of stories that they write themselves.
Yeah. And they have like ongoing characters that they mention a lot. They definitely have the ongoing character sort of vibe as well, where he takes the same people. They both take their own generals, so to speak, to all of their events or games and things like that, which is always great.
And it's creepy because it's like a Khorne army where it's led by mother and father, and they're like demons. It's very
like mother or father, yeah.
It's very good. See, now I want to meet these characters on the table. Now I'm curious, right?
Yeah.
I want to fight against them. Yeah, no, I met all of them. They're really great, and you know, Matt just runs like he just said like I'm gonna run narrative. Like if I'm organizing, I only run narrative. If you want, you can join me.
Yeah.
And his group, like they do campaigns and map campaigns and events. This is the thing. Narrative exists more at the local level than anything else. It's just that people just need to discuss this more openly.
Yeah, it's definitely out there.
And the other podcast is Pass the Story, started by the folks at the Mortal Realms podcast network.
Yeah, it's a new podcast, but the Mortal Realms is not a new podcast, so it's
yeah. So the network has the Mortal Realms, which is kind of like the story phase where they discuss new books and new novels. They have the Dogs of Warcry, where they discuss Warcry. And they have the What the Hex, which is the Underworlds one. And now they have Path to Story, which is specifically to decomplicate Path to Glory.
Or at least talk about it, yeah.
Yeah, because it's needed, because Path to Glory, it's a lot of pages, man. Like even I thought it was a lot of pages in the book.
It's a lot of pages.
There's a lot to digest. So they're essentially talking about how to run and how they are playing in Path to Glory, and how has been the experience for them, and like what are the most common doubts, because so we're all, I mean, I'm in the are you also in the narrative in the Mortal Realms Discord?
Yeah, I'm in that Discord.
Yeah, so we're all there and we're all asking questions to them, and very often they kind of field it. So we're figuring out a lot of things that we don't understand well. So Will is now a known quantity in the narrative scene. He is a known quantity during Animosity, during his deals as the Hobgrot.
Yeah.
And Paul is a veteran Neo from the Mortal Realms, and he runs the Gibbering Dome at Adepticon, which I hope I can attend this year. And Spencer's a new player, so she's bringing the perspective of, wait, slow down, guys. Explain this properly. Like, you need that. You really need that.
Yeah. She's like very new, like new to Age of Sigmar, like crazy new. Yeah.
I think that's the right perspective, because it's like no, slow down, explain this. How do you actually do it? And often, sometimes there's a lot of assumptions that people have that they shouldn't have, and you need someone with the outside perspective. Yeah, so we're tuning into all of this stuff, and yeah, so these are the things that 2021 had to offer. There's a lot of stuff. Narrative is in a good place. It's growing, and so these are the upcoming events that are, I mean, they're right around the corner. New Orleans is in the 11th of December. The New Orleans Open. Shorehammer starts in December 2nd.
Yeah.
Although, sorry.
That's only like a couple days away, so it's like
exactly. It's difficult to catch all these things, because sometimes something narrative is happening, you have no clue that it's happening. So we're trying to catch it and advertise it. And Oasis of Flame at the LVO is if you sign up, you might still get on the wait list, like if you get on the wait list, very often you manage to get into the event. That's, even when it's fully booked. So
that's
Bill, yeah. So this has been like very successful in the previous years. Previous year, pardon. So Bill had players kind of working for these these trader caravans, being mercenaries for trader caravans, and trying to. They had like coins and things they could trade and barter. And yeah, things are looking good. I think we have a lot to kind of tinker with, and I hope we've given people some ideas on what they can use and stuff they can build. I'm going to be very busy during this Christmas building terrain. So we're now going to have an interview that we've recorded, me and Aaron Bostian, with Dan Summerbell, who is a narrative player in the UK and a amateur author, but very prolific, on him writing the experience of going to these narrative events from the perspective of his army, but also dabbling a lot in short stories. So if you want to know how do you get into the narrative scene and what the experience is like, stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Tonight, we're joined by a player with an ongoing army narrative, someone who has attended Realms at War in Cambridge, UK, first in 2018 and again in 2019 when he won the renowned Spirit of Ra award. He's a narrative advocate and an amateur author, Dan Summerbell. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks very much for having me on.
So let's start off with asking you about Ra, because that's what we're all talking about. How has seeing the Ra narrative experience growing over the years, how has that been for you as a player?
Well, I've kind of come to the Raw experience relatively late. I got back into the hobby in 2017, and I'd played a game or two in my local club, and then was trying to find out more about it, and was on TGA, and suddenly saw this thread about this narrative tournament that was happening literally 5 minutes from where I lived at the time. And it was just sheer dumb luck that something that is, world leading in terms of the narrative experience was happening so close by. And I'd missed the deadline. I hadn't got a ticket in time, but I was lucky enough to get on the waiting list, and a ticket came up. And then I'm not, shall we say, the world's fastest painter, so getting a 1,500 point force together was a bit of a challenge. But I went there and was just blown away. I'd been to local club, found one or two players who were perhaps keener on the narrative side of things, but mainly it was people playing 40k or doing match play quite seriously. And so to find a whole community of people who were into that narrative experience was a real eye-opener, and it's kind of become the central focus of my hobby ever since.
So explain me this a little bit more. As you joined, you started interacting with the crew at Raw, and how was your sort of awareness of how much you could do in the event, how much they enabled you to do in the event?
It was, I knew nothing when I showed up. When I walked through the door for the first time, I had no idea what to expect. I wasn't on Twitter, so I missed the whole Road to Raw build up that they do. I didn't know whether people were going to take it seriously. I'd kind of written a bit of a background narrative, like handwritten in a notebook that I handed in at the start, really tentatively, because I wasn't sure whether that was the right thing to do or not. And then I started walking around and looking at the amazing level of hobby that was going on. And that was when I started. Well. Yeah, that was. But to see it in the flesh, I mean, the one that sticks in my head was Bish's Blue Goblins, which was just he was my first game at Raw, and it was mind blowing. But what was almost equally surprising or new was that people didn't really care that much about the outcome of the game. So I think the first time I ever won a game of Age of Sigmar was my first 500 point skirmish with Bish at Raw. because I wasn't just being blown off the table by people who knew the game really, really well, and that's how they played it. You know, and it was a lot of fun to just have people who, the outcome of the game in terms of who won or lost was less important than the really cool cinematic moment. And so if you wanted to make a decision that wasn't necessarily, you know, going for the objective but made sense, people would do that, but both sides would. And so it didn't really, you know, you didn't get some people who were playing really hard and some people who were playing for the story. People were building the story together. And it was, you know, as I began to sort of experience that through the day or the 2 days of Raw, you know, I was really beginning to think, you know what? No, I like playing match play. I like playing competitively with people, but this is where I want to really put the time and the effort, because it's fun. It's, you know, it is really, really fun, and that's what I enjoy out of the hobby.
When you were there, what did the organizers do to kind of, you felt enabled that you could do that? Was it immediately interacting with the other players because they already knew what was happening?
I think the way that they structure the pack, and so Raw has this, I think, unique structure where you start off with 500 points, and then you play a 625, a 750, then you're into sort of more complicated games with sort of doubles and things like that. And so the structure of it very much gives this sense of building. You're incorporating these new rules. So Raw 18 was the Aethemy. So basically you almost had an additional magic phase. And that was new to everyone. So you were kind of puzzling it out. And so people weren't puzzling it out in terms of, okay, how do I game this to get the biggest advantage on the table? They're saying, okay, how does this work? What's the spirit of it? How's this going to actually interact with the story? It's not heavy-handed. It's not saying, you know, you have to play with the story in mind, but the way the whole thing is set up very much facilitates that. And I think also, of course, you've got a mix of people who are brand new to it, like I was at the time, and people who'd been there since the first Raw, I think in 2014. And so they're, you know, they understand the way that, you know, Mitzi, Jimbo, Ming, Steve like to play. They've probably played with them for years at club and outside of the tournament scene, and they help share that ethos. You know, one of the really fun things about Raw 19, the most recent one, was part of the outcome was dependent on, or the setup for the last round of battles was dependent on who'd won a poll on Twitter. And so you literally had people involved from across the globe. I think the final score was 226 votes to 225. You know, so huge number of people involved, and it came down to one vote.
I remember voting. I wasn't too biased because I voted twice, once for each side, from two different accounts. Yeah. I mean, you couldn't ask for greater narrative attention though when it was like a runoff that it was so close. And I remember Mitzi posting, "You're like, it's tied. We just need a few more votes."
But that was, you know, we didn't really expect that to be the case, because the simple narrative that you would see if you were kind of glancing at what they'd set up for Raw 19 was you had the establishment and you had the good guys, the new insurgents.
The good guys.
Yeah, led by a London ogre. But you know, it's still, I think if you just glanced at it, the choice was pretty clear as to who was the fun side to vote for.
So just to explain to our listeners who may not have followed this, so the premise of Raw 19 was essentially a revolution, and one side was the established kingdoms of some part of the mortal realms, who were led by Sir Dracot Foot, played by Steve Foot, and the other side were the revolutionaries who said, no, this whole thing is rotten, we need to change things, led by Mitzi, who was playing Tarnos Brightmane, and clearly the good guys in your story. And essentially it all boiled down to essentially a voting, because it was a political play on the whole thing.
And this was obviously going on at a time of quite considerable political divide and turmoil in the UK. And, you know, thank God people tended to leave that out of it but some of the aspects or the satire did creep in. And that was really good fun. So Steve and I had a lot of fun sort of playing the the spin doctor to his Tony Blair. I was very much the Alistair Campbell, and he was talking about, he'd sort of drop in a mention of the money that the players had won as part of the games, because there were objectives on the table that involved not just winning the game, but collecting resources, food, and cash for your faction, and that then affected how you would play the next round of games. And he dropped in a reference that this money might have been ending up off realm, and then that ended up as a little aside in one of the, I was putting up sort of newspaper mock-up front pages on Twitter to try and give people a reason to vote for the establishment side, because we were doing something a bit different, a bit funny, and close that gap. And then one of the other players saw this on Twitter and picked up on it and made it, was sort of making a speech about how Drakelfoot was taking all the money and stashing it off realm. So people were sort of riffing off each other.
And that started completely naturally, spontaneously.
Yeah. Just a little aside, or actually a mechanic that they'd worked into the game to make it, to give you something to play for in the event of a unequal matchup. Because if you're running a narrative army, you're not necessarily taking the most powerful list in the world, and if you come up against someone who's playing something that just is going to dominate your list, it gave you something to do. So you weren't going to win the game, but maybe you could take one of the secondary objectives, and that actually did help your faction overall. And that was something that actually, I think, particularly for players like me, who are, to put it mildly, not the strongest match play player in the world, and running a list consisting of all the models I have painted.
As it should be.
Indeed. It was, it added some flavor that then got wound into the narrative, and that was great fun.
And was this something, because, clearly the establishment controls the means of communication. So did other people also make some of these news ads? Did they did something extra, or was it just mostly posts?
I think so. It started off with part of the Road to Raw. The organizers came up with the idea of the Purple Sun as a tabloid newspaper, and they had a sort of head-to-head comparison of the two main characters. Partly to introduce people so you knew what to expect when you showed up, and partly to generate a bit of buzz on Twitter. And that idea really tickled me, and I sort of picked it up and ran with it, and came up with some headlines that we could then put up as posters around the room to give it a bit of ambient background, but also went up on Twitter, released at various times over the event to try and get a bit of engagement on our side in the Twitter poll.
No, I think it's awesome. I think so. We've discussed now amongst ourselves if we just should do coverage like this for all events, not just also kind of ongoing narrative. I was like, this happened, that thing happened, so that other people get to know what's happening into other events, story-wise, but through an easy, captivating medium.
I think there's a trend of people doing that. So the Azir Weekly came out with this brilliant headline the other day, which was something along the lines of, Nagash launches inquiry after only Petrifex show up to battle.
I love the riffs on the actual community that he does.
Yeah. But I think, for the narrative community, there's even more there. And so, I'm looking forward to seeing how people, because I've seen people talking about the idea of reporting this way. I'm really looking forward to seeing what people come up with, because there's a lot of imagination and good humor out there that, if you're not able to go to events every weekend or play or model as often as you'd like, which I think is probably the situation we all find ourselves in, it's really fun to sort of see that kind of thing crop up on Twitter and just, remind you that there's a really fun hobby community out there.
So I wanted to ask you also about the narrative scene in the UK, for our listeners to have a bit of an idea of the kind of players that these are, playing with other narrative players. So now you've successfully infiltrated a narrative event. Yeah, great. You're in the scene. What happens now? Like, which other ones do you attend? How is it playing alongside other narrative gamers? How do you stay connected to this stuff?
So getting started and going to your first event is much easier than I think I expected. It was actually my first event of any Warhammer description. Sorry, my first event of any description of Warhammer was a narrative event, and
as it should be.
Well, yeah, and it was actually so lovely to just turn up and play. It was easier than going to a club night. People were much more relaxed. Doesn't mean that they didn't play by the rules, but they certainly weren't kind of measuring things the nearest half inch, unless the narrative always took precedence. Got to be a little bit flexible, because it's not a nicely symmetrical, fairly laid out table that's designed for a balanced game.
Yes.
So there will be sources of imbalance there. Sometimes literally when you're trying to put models on a high place, and you got to just roll with that and try and work with your opponent a little bit to turn it into a fun game for both of you.
I mean, it's the motto of it, always consider your opponents fun.
Yeah, and consider the story. You are there. You don't necessarily have to have an end in mind. In fact, you probably shouldn't, because otherwise you end up trying to kind of force something. You got to let the dice take you where they want to go. But you're always there trying to sort of work out what would be happening if these little plastic figures actually grew to 10 times the size and started moving about. What would really be happening here? Which is fun to imagine. Probably less fun to experience, but it's fun to imagine.
And other going to other events and kind of you've meeting some of the same players, the same narrative players from event to event. How has that been? Like how is it playing with them? Like the kind of, what is it being part of a narrative scene, so to speak?
Sure. I mean, it's incredibly welcoming, and I've kind of been able to dive in headfirst and get stuck in, which is something that I wanted to do. I've got friends who joined me at their first narrative events earlier in the year, who maybe are a little more laid back, didn't want to throw themselves in quite so headfirst, but had a really good time, enjoyed playing the games, and so I found that whatever the opposite of cliquey is, that's how I describe it, which has just been super. What's good is it's a good mix of you see the same faces, you make friends, and also you see a churn of new people there. So I reckon the last event I went to, I don't think I played anyone that I had played before. Everyone was a new opponent, but I had met at other events about half the people I played, and then half the people I played I was meeting for the first time. And that was just how it shook out. And actually,
you guys are attracting a lot of people then. It's great.
There is a bit of a churn. I think one of the things that kind of spurs that is that the events are really oversubscribed. So there's always a waiting list. There's always kind of people trying to get in and get tickets. That I think can sometimes be maybe the biggest barrier, and the thing that I'd love to change if I could wave a magic wand and do that. Because they're run as labors of love. There's only so many tables you can fit in a hall. Can't really run an event like that with like a huge grand tournament with dozens of tables. And so if you're not in the know and you haven't heard about the event going on sale, then sometimes the first you'll hear about it is people celebrating that they got tickets and other people, commiserating when they didn't.
And even if if you're 1 hour late, you're still out of tickets.
Yeah. But I mean, that's as long as everyone, like rolling a dice in the games we play, as long as everyone starts with the same set of knowledge, then that's one thing. I think it's someone who's trying to break into the scene and doesn't come across it until it's too late, that could actually feel a little bit excluding. And that's what I'd love to kind of, I guess, publicizing these things, or just having people want to go after it, want to do it enough that they'll actually keep an eye out and go for it, even though they've not experienced this yet, because they're going to be up against a bunch of people who have been to one or more and really, really want to go back. And they will be camping the site, or sitting there. I got in trouble at Raw one year for sending my ticket application too early. They actually sent me the money back.
Wait, how? Never mind. I won't ask. I
hadn't realized that they were opening it. It was the first time I'd kind of
too
done one
early.
Of those. Yeah. So I was like, as soon as I heard about it, I was like, oh yeah, PayPal, send it over. And they were like, no, Dan. When we open tickets, then you can send it. And if you're first,
I like your 40, tactics. You're a prepared man.
So mea culpa on that one. But
there's a silver lining. What this means is that there's a appetite for more people to start running their own, because if they pop up, people will go. They just need to be advertised, because if they are advertised, people will go, I suppose.
Oh yeah, and it's infectious. We've seen, I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more, but we've seen the Raw team kind of come onto the scene. We had Paul Buckley, run a narrative event in his, technically in his garage. It is the dream garage as far as any wargamer is concerned, but it is still technically a garage, and get a decent number of people in it. We've seen people kind of take be so inspired by Raw that they wanted to go and run their own event, and that's where WitneyWarhammer came from. And I'm not going to lie, I'm looking at my increasing collection of scenery and wondering, could I have 4 people round and run a little narrative weekend of my own? Could I get, could I fit 2 tables in somewhere, without risking a divorce too closely? I'm not sure yet, but it just gets you thinking, because you see how much fun it is and how much fun people have, and I guess as a narrative organizer, I say this not having organized one, but just watched it happen, you do have a lot more creative input than someone who's just got to work out the mechanics for a tournament and make sure the scenery is fair and balanced, for a competitive tournament. You can have a lot of fun, both beforehand planning it out, and also, on the day, throwing in little twists and turns, and maybe putting your thumb on the scales if someone's having a really bad day, and is 0 from 4 so far. Maybe you slip them a magical artifact before their next battle that gives them the edge. Who knows?
And we all know organizer will always try to reinvent the wheel and create a bunch of whole new rules, despite the fact that we pretty much already have everything we need. But it will always happen. Yeah.
There's always that temptation. But I think, at the very least, narrative organizers tend to throw in some some new game plans, some new battle plans that don't necessarily have to be completely balanced one way or the other. You still need a good game out of it. Or you can have all of one team playing one side and all playing the other, or you could have the team, if you got, as a lot of narrative events seem to be, I say a lot, but as some narrative events seem to be trending towards, having teams. So you've got Team A versus Team B, and that means that actually, even if you lose a game, you can score your team a couple of points, and it helps you feel a little less like you've not contributed anything if you are as bad at A, remembering tactics, and B, rolling dice as I am.
And if you're a new player coming into the scene, you immediately start to get to know new people more easily, instead of you're always bounced from opponent to opponent without making buddies with your team and kind of getting to know people a bit better.
And having your little snippets of narrative between the rounds. We're not in a situation where everybody is role playing. Not everybody's comfortable with that, and nor should they feel like they have to. But if they want to pitch in, they're more than welcome to. But if you want to sit at the back and just be told a bit of the story and then go on and play your next game, with just a little bit more context, that is 100% fine. That's a completely valid way of enjoying and playing the tournament. If you want to be the person, running around and trying to fool your opponents by leaving documents marked top secret, do not leave this document anywhere around the room, as we tried in the last tournament I went to, then you can do that too. We dramatically overestimated the intelligence of our opponents. None of them picked up on this elaborate double bluff. We should have known better than to try it with a bunch of destruction players.
But it was worth trying because it made it more funny. So this was the Warhammer Whitney event, correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So so this was run by Phil and Charles, and we were just looking at it from a distance. It looked so good, so funny, extremely well catered as well.
Yes.
So
yeah.
So what part did you play? So you were in Team Dracothfoot. What part did you play in the politics of the player teams this time?
So I get on really well with Steve Foot, who kind of plays Dracothfoot, and it's always fun to sort of support him and be a little bit of a foil to his character and his narrative. So he's not just kind of doing it on his own to the room, because as I said, the room might not particularly want to play the game. They just want to be entertained and watch Steve do his thing. So I got into costume for the first time in my life. That was a bit of a step for me. I was a little bit kind of nervous about doing that, but I wore something that I thought I could at least kind of shed reasonably quickly if I need to. And it turns out it was so hot that weekend, most people were out of costume within 10-15 minutes or so of the start. But of course, during COVID, we were all in masks, and my army narrative has gone down the undead route. So I thought, well, why not wear a white mask and then have some fake blood coming out from behind it? So I walked up to Steve, and I think it was Ben Johnson, and just started chanting, and this red gore was slowly seeping through my mask and dripping down my face. And my one regret was that I didn't have somebody filming to see their expressions as this dawned on them.
We have photographic evidence of the fallout, at least.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I saw that the teams had like their own secret rooms and having their secret meetings for all these plots, right?
Yeah. So the genius of the WitneyWarhammer event, and I use that term completely literally, was they managed to weave a kind of mystery into the narrative. And you could win clues for your team either by heroic feats on the battlefield, or by solving puzzles and riddles as the weekend progressed. And those, successfully solving those riddles would get the team more clues, or more information that they could use to kind of take a guess at the final answer. And then the games decided who got the first, as well as giving you some clues, decided who got the first guess at the end of the weekend. And the reason this was such a brilliant innovation was that it meant that everybody could be contributing to the team, whether they won or lost their game. So I brought a mate along, his first narrative event. He and I regularly play at club level, and anyone who's going to repeatedly play with me, is not going to be a high standard competitive player, because otherwise it would get very dull for them very quickly as they steamroller me. So we play fairly regularly, and his first couple of games did not go particularly well, but he was picking up on clues for his team and solving things and collecting, helping other people with their clues that they were struggling with. And so even though, it's some, if you go to a competitive tournament and you get steamrolled in your first 4 games, you end up feeling, not too great at dinner the first evening. This guy, I don't think he won any of his first 4 games, but actually he probably won his team more points and got them closer to the clue than any other one person in the room. So it was a really neat little innovation that just threw another way to contribute. and kept people interested in the narrative, in the story that was kind of developing, that was being unveiled as it went forward.
No, I think Phil and Charles put together something really, really cool, and it's so many dimensions they added on top, because you need to kind of control these things as a GM. It's not always easy, because there needs to be quite a bit of preparation. You need to foresee some of the weird stuff that players might think on doing, that you don't know it's going to break your entire scoring system.
Oh yeah, you got to roll. You got to roll with it. If players want to drop a model from their table over to somebody else's table to try and
did they allow it?
The game. Oh yeah.
Christ.
Steve Foote sent a Tenebril shard dropping down to try and capture. So in my 5th game, I think I was playing Ben Mardle's Caradron Overlords and getting shot to pieces. But I'd given up on the objective I was actually supposed to be playing for the battle plan, and was trying desperately to recapture Ulf Sywin, who was the Phil's character, but also who was represented on some of the tables, and he'd been taken hostage because of a bad business deal. This was emerging from the narrative in the run-up, and that was reflected in the overall scoring system, that whoever held the Ulf Sywin character would get a load of points and clues and things like that. So there was sort of a point to it, but also I was in it for the story, and so I was desperately trying to wrestle this hostage back. Sort of last roll of the dice, desperate charges, doing my re-rolls, picking my re-rolls very, very carefully, all with this one objective, and got so close to no cigar. And then Steve drops this Tenebril shard from a great height onto the table, and it whiffs completely. I think he it was evidently somewhat disoriented by the unusually long journey and arrival. I don't think it either scored. I don't think it inflicted a single wound, and then got wiped out in the aftermath, allowing the hostage takers to retreat just out of range. But that's it was probably one of the most fun moments of the whole tournament, because it could have gone either way.
Tenebril shard is the perfect assassin to draw. He's the best. But yeah, he has to
right out of the blue. Came right out of the blue, literally, and it could have gone either way, and it ended up going spectacularly wrong, and it makes for a great story.
It does. I think that's the best part. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got to be flexible and allow players to do those kind of things and roll with it. And if it does end up being a little bit unfair, you can always put, as an organizer, I guess, you can always put your thumb on the scales in the other direction in the next game or the next round, or do whatever it takes to keep it fun.
Or pass them a muffin.
Indeed. Yeah. Well, there was so much cake and so much good food.
It looked so good. So now a more practical question, for a lot of players out there, narrative players, that this is something that people spend a lot of time on, which is building an army narrative. And this now ties into Path to Glory, that now has an actual concrete mechanical rules framework to allow players to do this and take their army story from event to event, to game to game to game. So you've technically taken the same army from the same city, which are the Wanderer Forces of Eranost, to several events, right? And each event's change your army's story, but also composition and model. So tell us your tricks, summarize this to us, what you've done.
I mean, anything I say in response to this is going to be completely post hoc. I've had fun with it, and
nobody knows,
and it's
nobody knows. This is you're giving us the behind the curtain, and that's the secret, right? You sort of slightly retcon to make a better story.
Exactly. Well, that's exactly how I've written most of the narrative, which is remember the fun bits and the battles, and then I like to imagine when I write stories based on some of the things that happen, but I like to imagine that I'm writing this story 1,000 years after the event. So it's not it doesn't have to be, you don't have to record every roll of the dice or everything that went well or went badly. you get a sense of the flow and what happens overall, and you let that guide you and not feel too constrained by it. But I have a lot of fun kind of turning that into stories. I think one thing that is a bit of a double-edged sword, but can really help to start getting your army narrative going is name your characters. Even I'd say almost especially the lieutenants and the army champions, the unit champions, and the the minor characters in your story, because they'll do crazy things on the battlefield that will make you incredibly attached to them. The reason it's a double-edged sword is they will also die,
and it
horribly
hurts
and
more,
frequently.
and it hurts a lot more, and you never forget it.
Yeah, and if you're trying to think up a narrative, there's a reason why in books and things there's survivorship bias, right? The main character bias, plot armor, whatever you want to call it, and that doesn't tend to happen when you're rolling dice. And there's only so many times you can sort of say, oh, so and so lost a limb, or was knocked unconscious, but the tide of battle rolled over him, and it turned out that he was fine the next day. But I think having those, I know a Chaos players have had great fun by they name their champions and then they let them roll. And if they get greater and greater glory to Chaos, and then they get slaughtered, and that's just part of the part of the great game, or part of their contribution to the Throne of Skulls, and another champion steps forward. And I love that idea. I'm not a Chaos player, but that really tickled my fancy. In my stories, my characters do die, perhaps a little more frequently than you might be expected. It does mean that there's a bewildering array of names. I recently came back to Eranost and wrote not a full sequel, but a short story that kind of took the narrative into its next step, prior to WitneyWarhammer. And I realized I couldn't remember who all these bloody characters were, so God knows how my readers cope with it.
And they're all elves, which just makes the
indeed.
names sound the same.
Yeah, exactly. But I had models that I don't use anymore because I've killed them off, which seems a strange way to go about it, but actually,
that's my next stage. I don't know what I'm going to do when that happens.
Yeah.
With my own models.
But you can only put so many models on the table at once, and we do have an evolving, collection. Eranost has, it started out as a wanderer's army. Obviously that, disappeared, so it became a Cities of Sigmar army. It then, as a result of one of the tournaments, took a left turn and became an army of the dead. A little bit of Nighthaunt. I did buy the Legions of Nagash book, and I never got it out of the shrink wrap before that army disappeared, unfortunately. I'm a very slow painter.
But it was essentially, if I interpreted this correctly, it was in the fallout of the events of Raw 18, which was the Etherme. Is that correct?
It was actually the Fate of Sigmar event.
I see.
So the story that Paul Buckler wove, he just came up to my table and handed me an artifact. He said, "You've discovered this," and it was a mask of Nagash that I could use to boost my spell casting. And I decided that this had a corrupting influence, and that's where the sort of tendrils of death, the tendrils of Nagash, began to seep into Eranost. The deciding factor whether they won or lost was then based on Raw 19. The forces of death won, and so I went down the route of, rather than expanding my Cities of Sigmar and adding Sylvaneth and making a sort of full living city army, I turned the small group of death characters who were Raw 19 you had a war band as part of your army. So even though my army was,
I remember that.
yeah, even though my army was Cities of Sigmar, my warband were death models, and so I turned that into a full army. I mean, lockdown really helped with that because I need about a year and a half to paint up an army.
So
And they were
essentially,
ready in time for
the
WitneyWarhammer.
the Wanderers essentially recovered Erenost, which was their lost kingdom. But they were so desperate that essentially you had started dabbling in the night haunt, but you were literally given a choice, and now you've decided to just veer the politics of Erenost completely into raising all sorts of dead people.
Precisely, yeah. And so there's going to be a Soulblight Gravelords army, possibly a reskin of Cursed City with some Erenost being the Cursed City in question, if I can work out how to do that in a fun way. But it's, you know, it is it's a vehicle for playing fun games with people. I've got a bunch of friends that I've made through the narrative scene who've played parts in the story of Erenost, and we revisit from time to time. I dug out my old Warhammer Fortress and then added some bits to it from eBay, and also with the amazing castle that Dark Fantastic Mills have brought out. And so there's definitely going to be a siege of Erenost at some point. I haven't worked out who versus whom, but there is definitely going to be a siege of Erenost at some point. That might be my own dabbling into a narrative event. I think it would be quite fun to invite people round and then give them armies to play with. So rather than ask them to bring their own forces, to say, you know, here are, or ask them to bring some of their own forces, but say, actually, you know, here are some, this is your unit, you know, this is your mission, and get them to play each other under those circumstances.
You could even make a smaller scale event that you'd have enough models for everything. So a small scale in terms of like low points, so everyone has their little band.
Yeah. So you know, this is the fun bit of narrative gaming, right? You can do what you want with it.
Yep. So on the topic of like rolling with the punches and including the narrative sort of, I call them prompts, like things happen, like how do you choose to incorporate this into your narrative or not? What have you, if you've had, incorporated like the changes in the lore, like say in the Indition change and the Broken Realms change? Have you gotten to incorporate any sort of, you know, world-changing events into your lore yet?
I'm quite bad at keeping up with the the Warhammer lore. I find it a little bit overwhelming, as I think maybe people do. But that's what I like about the Mortal Realms, is a bit like the 40k universe. They are big enough that as long as you stay within the spirit of the world or of the universe, then you can more or less do what you like with it. And so, you know, I really like the idea that there are these great struggles between the gods going on, and at the same time, there's the little petty squabble over the ruins and rubble and dust that is all that is left of the once great city of Erenost.
People just want to sell their produce, right, on a day-to-day basis. That's it.
Yeah.
Agrarians of Sigmar. That's what we need.
Precisely, right. And it's not a coincidence that a lot of the Warhammer fiction that's out there centers around ordinary people in these great worlds, rather than around the great characters themselves, because it's just much more relatable. I did try at one point. There were hints that a new god was coming on the scene, and people wondered whether it might be Kurnoth. And actually, at the end of Erenost, there's some hints towards that. Turned out it was Kragnos. So
I was disappointed.
Look,
I'll own it. I was disappointed.
He's a fantastic. You know, it's a fantastic model. It's a fantastic lore. And actually, it doesn't completely. You know, it didn't ruin my story either, because actually, you know, none of these gods are nice, right? So the horrible things that happened as a result of the beast god, or the hints at the beast god that I drew into the story, you know, I think fit Kragnos just as well as Kurnoth. So the lore is going on out there, and I try and keep up with it as best I can. But I'm also just sitting in my own little corner of the mortal realms and having a great deal of fun without having to feel like I've got to keep up with every single second of the narrative and be perfectly true to the core story of Age of Sigmar.
And you can destroy entire provinces and cities, and it doesn't really affect, like, if you build them yourself and then destroy them in your own narrative, it literally doesn't matter. So you're
Precisely.
free to do all of those things. In this edition, they went a bit further, like doing the cursed skies and all the beasts. They went a bit further in how much impact this had in the realms. That's why I was curious.
I may have a bit of catching up to do before I write the next installment in the Eranost.
Because I'm taking
series,
them as a challenge, right? You have a narrative, and then now they change the world, and it kind of screws what you've been doing. So I think it's interesting to think, all right, how am I going to respond? It's as a sort of a narrative prompt, right? It's like a sort of improv by writing. Like you're writing, and now they turn your world upside down. And now you're going to have to, all right, how are you going to fix this to fit in the canon again?
100%, right? And so, I'm moving towards, as my armies change, as my Nighthaunt army becomes gets some Soulblight allies, and then becomes a Soulblight army with some Nighthaunt allies, and then becomes a Soulblight army. I mentioned I'm a slow painter. So that's the way it's going to have to go if I want to actually see them on the table this time.
You're not alone.
Yeah. I'm certainly not helped by my pathological need to convert every single model on the table. But
I suffer from the same syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah. But as the army changes, so does the narrative. The stories don't have to be completely consistent with each other. And actually, a little bit like a tournament organizer responding to that curveball, or a player in a tournament responding to a Tenebril Shard completely failing to do anything, and how that shapes the story. Actually, that can really help dig you out of a rut. You're not having to make up the story on your own, and I think that's one of the most fun bits of narrative gaming. Is writer's block almost doesn't exist, because you know what's happening, or something's happening, and you're getting these prompts thrown at you left, right, and center. But you can choose which ones you want to pick up. In the last year or so, my writing's really been, I think, almost every story in my new book has come out of somebody else in the hobby. So Eranost was something I kind of wrote for myself, and about games I'd played with other people, but about my army and my games. There are stories in there that were originally written for a halfling battle tome that Darren Watson's writing. So he's made this complete battle tome. Oh, it's going to be magnificent. He's got a really fantastic artist. He's a brilliant player, so the rules are going to be beautifully balanced because he knows the game inside out. The lore is, I've not contributed to the lore. I've contributed to some stories, because the lore is being written, by people who love the way that lore works in Age of Sigmar, and then I've written a couple of stories for it, and that just gave a completely new prompt and a new direction, and was something different. That was something that was great fun. Other stories inspired by a gaming board that someone put together. Steve Foote had put together a fantastic 40k urban board, and that became a detective pastiche that I put together, inspired by some of the locations that he'd written into the
that board is amazing.
He created in the board. Yeah,
the board is amazing. Like all this nightlife of I don't know, a hive city or whatever city in some planet. So yeah, so this is kind of just hot off, if not the press, at least from your hard drive. This is a new book that you've put together, stories from more recent developments, right?
Yes, yeah. So it's got it has a single short story, sort of taking the next step in the chapter of Eranost. It has the stories that I wrote as part of the run up to World War One, so WitneyWarhammer 1, and then pretty much to fill the pages, everything else I've written for various sources in the last year, which it is a little bit cobbled together, but has been fun just to kind of throw that into the mix and put together a book of short stories, basically.
It's called The Night Hunt, correct?
The Night Hunt, which is the name of my Night Haunt army, inspired by the Wild Hunt, and there's still a lot of LV influence, as Ollie Grimwood puts it, good elves.
Good elves. So tell us a bit more about, other people have been doing this, but you're the first one to actually put it in a concise format and share it with the community to essentially show that this is something you can do. Tell us a bit more about that.
So I started writing down kind of battle reports, I guess, when I was playing a club with a mate called Toby, and I actually pinched one of his characters. So he was playing with this AOSified undead, sort of classic undead army, and he had this necromancer that he called Vorshad the Purple, and it just tickled me. Like, I really liked, and this guy could not roll dice for this particular character. Every time he tried to cast a spell or raise the dead or fight in combat, this guy had no luck. And so this character kind of popped into my head, and I started writing down. And it was literally just for me and Toby, and kind of sharing that between us. And he either enjoyed hearing that or did a very good job of tolerating it. Either way, that gave me a bit of confidence to write some more stuff up. And as I went through Raw 18, I'd kind of jotted down what had happened, just in very bald terms, in the in gaming terms, just to kind of have a record of it. And I realized that there was a bit of a story there. I'd written a really short story to kind of introduce the characters, and the wonderful thing about Warhammer, where it's different to playing a video game or playing chess or something like that, is that you get these amazing cinematic moments. And for a writer, it actually completely removes the fear that you're saying something that's implausible or cliche or anything like that, because it happened. The dice said it did, and it just made it easy to write these things down. And the more I got into it, the less constrained I felt to follow exactly what had happened on the table. My characters died a lot more than I admitted they did in the book. And
they're just severely wounded.
Occasionally they were just severely wounded, but sometimes I just ignore it, because AOS is a brutal game, and if you want to have characters that are long-lasting, you have to be a little bit flexible with the truth of what happens on the table.
Well, as far as we know, the serious injury charts for a lot of the games are essentially a third is just you were knocked out, but you're fine.
And I'm sure any neurosurgeons listening to your podcast are wincing slightly at the idea that multiple concussion is it, but yeah, it's the model realms.
That's why the plots thicken as the narrative goes on.
Yeah. The really stupid decisions that my characters make towards the end of the book, it was nothing to do with my incompetence on the table. It was
exactly.
Yeah, it was getting their brains knocked out in chapter 1.
We had a player, as an aside, we had a player that every time he lost a game, the voices just got louder in his general's head. So it's a way to tie it in.
I mean, I've seen some amazing stuff that Khorne players have done where their characters die and they generate a new one. And if they die on the table, that's it. They're gone.
Hardcore.
But I think that almost the freedom that it's okay for that to happen, and narratively someone else from the warband's going to step up, and that very much fits the character of the army, if not the sort of classic fantasy trope, which can often be quite there's a lot of protagonist bias going on. I've seen some really interesting narrative stuff like that. But partly writing up the stuff from Raw, I wanted to capture the narrative that other people had put on the table. So Nick Shepherd had this army of giants that was controlled by a farmer who'd stumbled across a purple flower in his field that gave him this power control. And he never wrote that story down anywhere. You literally just looked at the army, and that story was abundantly clear from seeing it on the table. I absolutely loved that, and I that was something I had to write in and capture from the perspective of an outsider, my army meeting them on the table. So capturing little moments like that is a great deal of the pleasure of writing these things down.
No, and I hope more people start doing that as well. We're starting to see other Neos and narrative players on Twitter excited about joining that, even if they're not running an event. So it's something that we've discussed before, which is there are many ways to participate in the hobby, even outside of narrative. And narrative offers this extra option, which doesn't necessarily even involve hobbying with models. It's getting involved into the stories, into the events, and in tying things together. So in the process of writing your novelization, which is called Eranost and Other Stories, so you guys can find it and you should read it. It's very good. I would say Black Library good. It's really well written. I feel that
Thank you.
It's really it's doing that thing that we feel we need, which is diving deep down into the ground level of just folks in the realms and seeing like the small level politics and how it interacts with larger things. And I think that's kind of how I think we all feel that we always get a very bird's eye view. If you open your battle tome and you just get a very, it's like you're reading a campaign setting for some RPG, very high arcs, very, very high arcs. And yet often you wonder, like, what's happening really? How do people actually relate to each other? And I really liked it.
So the inspiration actually came from Ricky Smith, who have you seen Ricky's work? Yeah, yes. I can see your. The inspiration came from Ricky Smith, who is a absolute master converter. I mean, if you haven't seen his stuff on Twitter, find him and marvel. But also, before Cities of Sigmar came out, he was writing a fan battle tome, which was basically, it was the Iron Weld Arsenal. And he asked me to come up with a couple of short stories for it. And his brief was, show me how for a citizen of the mortal realms, going into the forest and meeting a dryad or a single Skaven can be utterly terrifying.
Yes. And
so those are the first two stories in Eranost. And they came from that prompt, that idea was entirely the inspiration for it. And I think it's a really, you can spend a lot of time dealing with the gods and the epic scale of the mortal realms, but just taking that little time to think about how scary it is to be a human being living there is another really fun way of looking at it, and can lead to a whole other set of narrative possibilities.
No, I think in the way you allows you to also bring to life the story that the organizers have set up for the narrative event. It allows you to flesh out the little details that not only are making up at the table, that actually end up then, because you run a narrative event, but it's never really what the story they've created is never really complete. You're leaving so many holes, which is we do on purpose generally, so that players can fill them, and then your event story like changes. What the event was meant to be changes during the event itself with the contributions of players, and you can put that together in an even more concise package. And I think that's something I think we have a lot to. I feel I have a lot to learn to kind of how to do that, because I think it sells a really, really cool idea.
Well, I think, fundamentally, Eranost is not the story of Raw. It's a story of Raw. And there were 40 other players and 40 other stories and 40 other perspectives that were interlinked and, meeting each other. the Lawrence Craven we had 2 battles at Raw 18, which inspired a lot of the story that I then wrote down. And so we made sure that our final match at Raw 19, sort of the climax to the story there, yet to be told, was a clash between our 2 armies. And so having that to sort of come back to was, I think, an example of exactly what you're saying. There was nothing in the pack that made that happen, although the organizers did kind of adjust things so we could make sure that we met. But that's what you're there as a tournament organizer. You're inspiring stories and you're giving people something that they can riff on, they can play with, rather than constraining people or leading people in the way that you would as, like, I guess, a dungeon master in Dungeons and Dragons or something. You don't have that level of control over what's happening. There's probably many people who play D&D who are shaking their heads there going, control over my players? I don't know what you're talking about. But as a TO, you have even less still. But I guess that gives more freedom.
Mm-hmm. You do have to keep sort of like strings connected with more tables and more people. And I guess but you do also have more time because people are playing. You have more time to think of, like, all right, I'm going to tie this together, and you can kind of go have a break and have a think.
There really is like a collaborative process in the AOS narrative events, and I think this is kind of like a theme throughout many of them is that it again, it's when you're sitting down to a game that doesn't have a GM, you've got players coming at it with equal investment and essentially equal opportunities for collaboration, and then tying that together with the Neo can be a really dynamic experience. But yeah, I and especially talking with like Steve and Raw seems to really exceed at that, and how as a player, especially if like talking about your first time, Dan, was interesting to hear. But I mean, is there, especially with a 2-day event, do you feel any kind of a shift from the beginning where everybody's kind of warming up to each other? And I know maybe it helps because some players do kind of like the narrative equivalent of grudge matches. Does that dynamic change? Do you feel more of a collaborative effort as the weekend goes on? And is there a sense of something happens and you're like, oh, now that makes sense. This which triggers something that happens in my army, and so on and so forth. That was a terrible question, I know. But do you see where I'm going?
I do.
This is
Yes.
why I dropped out of journalism school.
So yes, it takes a little bit of time for everyone to warm up, because you've got maybe half the players there up to half who have not done this before. In some cases, not been to an event before, or not been to an event that wasn't strictly match play. But I think the fact that you do have a critical mass of players who've seen it before, who know kind of how it works. So the odds are that you're playing someone who has been to Raw before or has participated. Could be interesting this year because it's expanded to 60, up from 40, which is going to be a big expansion to handle. But to be honest, it kind of happened very quickly. You get through that first game, you realize this is a little bit different, and you've got someone who's sort of explaining to you that, yes, I know you got tabled turn 2, but actually that secondary objective you captured, that's contributed to putting us ahead of the other team at this point. So making it a team dynamic, making it not quite as focused on, okay, you're on table 1 and he's on table 20. I think that helps set the tone very early on, and after maybe that first introductory 500-point game, where a lot of people there are still remembering which dice to roll when, myself included, it really starts to flow. And that doesn't mean everyone's full-on cosplay participating, because that's not the expectation. You turn up, you're there, you listen to the story being told, and if you want to participate in that story, you're more than welcome to. And if you just want to listen to it, that's also a way of enjoying the tournament.
That sounds really cool. It does sound like that classic advice that you get out. The experience you get out is equivalent to what you put into it. The more you invest, the more dynamic experience you're going to derive from it. But at the same time, too, and we had talked about this earlier, it shouldn't put people off that aren't really sure if they're ready for that level of investment, especially on the hobby side. And Steve talked about this too, is all of us want players that may have never attended any kind of a narrative event before to come and enjoy it. I think, you've talked about not feeling very confident in your tournament match play abilities, Dan. And I think for some narrative players, there's a hesitance to get involved in match play tournaments. And I've sometimes wonder if there's a kind of a reverse with tournament players that, see some videos or some pictures from an event like Raw with players in bodysuits and running around and just shaking their head and not sure what to make of it and unsure about getting involved in that kind of event. What would you say to a match play tournament player that's never attended a narrative event before, Dan, to encourage them to take that risk and step out a little bit?
Well, I think I've had two very different experiences from the two Raws I've been to, and they've both been overwhelmingly positive. So the first year I went, I had no idea what to expect. I'd never been to a Warhammer event before, let alone a narrative one. And I sort of watched these people telling a story, and I had a whale of a time. And I could get involved with the storytelling on a very personal level, with my opponent, who was each time was a really friendly person and player, and I made friends across the table that year, as I did the following year. And then the second year, I threw myself into it and was prepping stuff beforehand and doing the road to Raw and helping Steve out with as his press officer and all the rest of it. Completely different approach, but both were fun. And actually, if everybody tries to, jump in with both feet, then you won't get a coherent story out because you can't have 40 people trying to tell different stories all at the same time. So if you just want to go along and see what's happening and listen to people tell the stories and then tell your own individual narrative with the people you're playing across the table, that's a fantastic way to experience it. That's exactly how I experienced Raw 18, and I loved it, and it made me want to come back.
I think that's something. Thank you for emphasizing that, because I think that's also something we want to work a bit on, which is working on. So there's an unfolding narrative, but it's happening all over the tables, and there needs to be a lot of essentially wrapping up to kind of so that people understand what has been happening. And I think putting things down in kind of like the news advertisement form, if that can also help other players experience the story better, as spectators, like you said, which I think is important, that you can participate, yet exactly what's happening in the whole event without you needing to be in the thick of it.
Yeah, and I think from the position or the perspective of a player at a narrative event, there are two stories going on. There's the overall story of the event. So in the case of Raw 19, the competing factions who's going to come out politically on top, the rebels or the establishment. But there's also the narrative of the story that you're playing with your army as it goes through the tournament, or the story of the battle that you're playing with your opponent right in front of you. And those three don't necessarily have to be 100% coherent. You can almost be enjoying both at the same time. And certainly, when I came down to writing these things down, there was a lot of kind of, well, I'm going to do this from this perspective of it's being written down by, a bard 1,000 years in the future. I don't have to be too accurate as to what went on, or play to bits of the story that were hugely entertaining at the time, but didn't necessarily fit a coherent narrative, a single coherent narrative throughout the whole weekend. And so it's almost, I think, a case of being relaxed about that. As a tournament organizer, you want a overall theme that people can kind of follow through, and you can make jokes on, and can be quite, often can be quite lighthearted. And then if people want to tell a really serious story about what their models in front of them got up to, your story doesn't prevent them doing that. And yet, if someone wants to come up and play some fun games that aren't, nice and symmetric match play tournaments and with fun people and drink a couple of beers, then they've got something that kind of an overall coherent narrative that sweeps them through the whole weekend, but they don't have to put much more thought into it than that because they're enjoying other aspects of the hobby.
Yeah.
To shift away from the hobby just a bit and the events, I'd like to ask you, Dan, about your writing. This is not your first attempt to craft some fiction in the universe, I believe. It's just tell us a little bit about your approach to writing and why. I've never known anyone who shows up to a tournament with a novel printed up, but I can appreciate it. I really enjoy writing myself, often to the detriment of my friends in various chats that I'm involved in. I have a tendency to type down a lot of wall of text. But yeah, I'm kind of curious, why part of your hobby time is involved in writing, and talk a little bit about, when we think about hobby, we think primarily, building, painting, basing, display boards, but we don't really talk about writing narrative as being part of that whole hobby experience.
So, well, I think the first answer may surprise you slightly. It's cheap.
And so, that is true. Not on time, though, but yes.
No. But, I mean, it was actually quite a, the time and effort that people put into their contributions to something like Raw, with the, everything from the tables through to the armies that you see, the amount of time and effort and expense that's gone into that is orders of magnitude above what I was able to put into writing something and doing a bit different. And it was also something that I could do. I was working away from home a lot of the time, so I was able to write because I had my laptop with me, but I couldn't necessarily take my my models and my paints with me quite as easily. But that aside, I think there's a lot of storytelling that goes on, and sometimes people do write it down, or they really enjoy reading the Black Library books, and they'll come around and something like the open submissions will come up, and that'll be the first time that we've tried to write something down. And I kind of realized that I missed the window last year. So I think it happened in January. I'd never really thought about it, but I was starting to write these stories down. I thought, you know what? I'm going to practice by writing a book. And it's not going to be something that is going to be good enough to get published, because to get published as a first-time author, particularly in fantasy and science fiction, and doubly so in a universe like Black Library where someone else owns the IP, you have to be exceptional. You have to be, absolutely stand out, amazing. And you can't just expect to do that straight off. So how can I get some practice and take that pressure off of, like, I don't have to be stand out amazing. I just have to build my craft and do something fun that maybe other people enjoy. and you know what, I can give it away and yet still spend an order of magnitude less on it than if I'd done a completely custom army or something like that. I really thought about it as hobby spend. And so I got not only did I get the book printed, a fairly limited run, a copy for anyone who wanted one at Raw and a couple of spares, but I got it edited as well. So I had a friend of mine who is a published author but does some freelance stuff as well, and I actually put aside the cash and said, look, can you go through this and not edit every single line, because I couldn't afford that, but give me some overall notes on the structure and how to improve as a writer and how to build characterizations and things like I'd never really thought about before. Because when you read a book, it's a very different experience to when you try and write one for the first time. And odds are I'm not going to be a published author in future, but it was still a really fun learning experience, and actually a bit like you learn to do object source lighting when you paint for the first time, and you watch a tutorial and you get it wrong and you produce a mini that like you're really proud of, but you're still not going to show anyone. But the next time you do it, it's fun because you're getting better. It's exactly the same experience. And I've been talking to some of the guys. So I entered the open submissions for Black Library this year. They turned it down in the first wave like a couple of months ago. But then this time around, people were coming out with their submissions that said, okay, well, this got turned down. What can I do differently? And I think it was Tom Parrott, who's one of my favorite Black Library authors, so said, look, when I was learning my craft, these were the kind of exchanges that really kept me going. Like, read each other's pitch, give each other some feedback. And because it's been turned down, you don't have to just say, if you just say nice things about it, you're not helping. You have to look for the things of saying, this is what you can do better, because they know it's, we both know that our original pitch wasn't successful. And that's been a really helpful experience. So my next project is an entry for a fan call called Cold Open Stories. You can find them on Twitter. They are doing audio dramas in the 40k universe.
Oh, yes.
And it's completely fan, so it's completely amateur, completely fan written, fan produced. I think, for Colin, who's the guy who runs it, I think that's his hobby. So he puts money into it and puts time into it. So what he's put together is something that's really inspired a lot of people to pick up a pen or at least a keyboard. He's got he's pulled together an editing team. He's publishing flash fiction, so 1,000-word competitions that kind of get people, trying to write that maybe haven't written before, through to some really fantastic and very experienced authors out there sort of throwing their hat in the ring. He's got longer, sort of, what you call short stories still, but 5,000, 10,000 words. And of course, he does audio dramas. And so, not by no means has everything I've submitted to Cold Open made it onto the site. So actually, a lot of the content for the Night Hunt and other stories was things that didn't quite make the cut at Cold Open. But he has published a couple of my short stories. One of which was recorded as he got a voice actor to read it, so it was sort of an audio book, and one was adapted into an audio drama with the cast and sound effects and all the rest of it. And that was so much fun to write, and so I co-wrote the audio play along with Colin, and that was a whole new challenge. I actually had to change a lot of the story to make it work for radio. And thinking about that, when you think about things as a writer, you convey emotion, or you convey, you set the scene in a certain way. When you're trying to do that through dialogue alone, because you try and minimize the amount of kind of narration because that's closer to an audiobook.
Mhm.
It's hard, and I admired Colin's work already, but it gave me a real appreciation for what he's done, because a lot of the stories on the site are written by him, but he's also trying to pull in other authors as well.
I mean, that's I think to create that sort of community, also especially getting people to write better, go through an editing process, professional editing process, and also learn the ropes of what it takes to create an audio drama. These are great skills, and also the networking that comes out of it. It's all done within. This is all fan community based, right?
Yeah, it's 100% voluntary. It's people giving up huge amounts of time. I know Colin's, it's his passion project. I know he's invested money into it, and so server hosting and all the rest of it. He doesn't take any payment. He doesn't, because it's all, in order to steer clear of any copyright issue, it's all not for profit. He's bringing together people who wouldn't necessarily meet in the hobby otherwise. The voice actors, not all of whom are diehard 40k fans. Some of them are there for the voice acting. They're semi-professional. That's their hobby, their passion. And he's bringing that community together with people who are into the lore of 40k, or who like writing, or who want to try out voice acting but have never done it before. So it's.
But this is something that we're seeing that is cutting across from the theater and voice acting. Voice acting maybe more directly, but also from the theater community and acting community. Is people are now discovering roleplay, or people that have done, they're now doing it a lot more, and for them is like, oh my god, this is improv on steroids with full creative control, but an actual narrative thread, which it always existed, but for some reason the spark hadn't connected, and now they're off to the races. Like these people, now you have entire live streams and companies like spinning out of this.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things about the hobby is that it encompasses a huge range of sort of levels of commitment, right from people who have dabble a little bit or play once a year at their local club with unpainted models, right through to people who literally make a living out of this. A lot of the staff at Games Workshop and in the Warhammer community team, they're players and hobbyists as well, and they come to events and they mix with the community, and so you have that full gamut of people. Now there is a kind of risk to that, which is that one feels compelled to monetize the hobby, and I think that is dangerous, because it can stop being fun. It rather than making your job like your hobby, it makes your hobby like your job, and I think that can be a bit of a nasty come down when people start to realize that. I've decided that I write for fun. I'm lucky enough, I enjoy my job that I do professionally. It's very different to the world of Warhammer, and I write for fun. And having seen and having spent time with a lot of the professional authors out there, I take my hat off to them, because it is an incredibly hard and sometimes cutthroat business. And so I'll be submitting for their open submissions. I really recommend other people do, but that's something that I think anyone who's entered the Black Library open submissions, wasn't successful this time around, because out of the 2,000 people, maybe 2 or 3 will be. It's insanely competitive. This is another opportunity to just keep writing, keep honing that craft, keep enjoying it, and even though I'm therefore increasing competition for the submission I'm putting in, I think it's really good for the hobby if that's better known, because what I think Cold Open Stories are doing is really exciting.
That's really good, because essentially, even if you would never get it through Black Library, let's say you do this for a number of years, you practice your craft, you actually get advice from a lot of people that are published or freelancer and have a few other things already maybe in. By the end of this process, you could end up writing for something completely different, but having learned all of that craft while doing something you enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, I think one caveat with that, and I think one of the reasons why Black Library open submissions is so popular is that even though I guess what you'd call old school, you'd call pulp science fiction, is still hugely popular, the way that the way we consume media has changed so much that there's less of a market for that now outside the big established IP like Black Library. And so I think there's a lot of people out there who are writing great stuff in that niche and don't have a lot of outlets for it, which is why I'm excited about Cold Open.
I agree. Yeah, you're right. Things have changed in the way people consume. Yeah, and it's more difficult for authors to get noticed and having their material read. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, there are some really great science fiction magazines out there, fantasy and science fiction, Clark's World, things like that. But they're quite highbrow. You know, they're the level of craft of writing there and the topics that they cover and things like that. It's very different from, you know, the action and adventure that a fan of Black Library might be looking for.
That's true, but you can sneak a lot of those things in.
Certainly, yeah. And look, I could be completely wrong. There could be some fantastic magazines out there that I just haven't stumbled across. So do point them my way if people are going, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. There's a fantastic, you know, pulp science fiction world out there that he's just not come across yet. But I think and it's only a good thing, you know, the explosion of the different ways that we consume the hobby, you know, podcasts, videos on YouTube, pictures on Instagram and Twitter, blogs, you know, and on top of that, you know, the traditional e-books rather than just novels, video games. You know, it's pretty different to back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, which were the real, you know, golden era of pulp fiction, because
that's true.
That was the main way that people got their entertainment, was, you know, buying a penny magazine from the newsagent on the way to the railway station, kind of thing.
Good.
That is true.
But yeah, we want to give you a chance. Is there anything else? And we'll talk, you know, offline about, you know, we'll put a link to to requesting your book. And
I tell you one thing, and this really would help. The thing I need people to do is, if you've had a copy of the book, for people to go and leave a review on Goodreads.
Okay.
So this, yeah, because if I do try and point publishers towards that in future, just saying, look, you know, here's the thing I did to build my profile and get a bit of engagement, and people do read my stuff, that could prove very helpful. So the link to for reviewing is tinyurl.com/Erinost. So if
we'll have it up.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. But that's for people who've had a copy and want to, if they want to help out further, then a review would be, you know, really useful for a couple of secret projects I've got in the works. So hopefully I can tell you about those next time I'm on, when they're all official.
Oh, cool. Oh, we're looking forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you, Dan, so much.
My pleasure.
We'll definitely have you on again. Really enjoyed talking with you.
I really enjoy that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing us more inspiration and giving us even more ideas on things to do. And keep at it, man. We'll love it, and we want to see more.
I'll do my best and keep up the good work. Really looking forward to the next episode.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man.
Cheers, then. Bye-bye.
Good night.
All right. I hope you guys have enjoyed. We'll have links to Dan Summerbell's books and the short stories that you can read for yourself and find out the story of his army as he went through all these events. And we've really enjoyed seeing all the stuff that has been happening and how does it feel to play in it. And Keegan, what else would you like to tell people, you know, to kind of join us in this stuff?
Have a Merry Christmas. Play more narrative games. It'll be fun.
Play more narrative games, folks. And I'm definitely going to make use of the Great Weave for my next event, like bully all my players to submit their army background to it. Like, that's how it works. That's how you have to do it.
This is like force players, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, like, how do you run your groups? How do you run your how are you a game master? Like, you have to do it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, man. This was a pleasure. And folks, join us. We're all in these narrative discords from all these platforms and campaigns, and we're all discussing lore and how to run events and just, you know, shooting the shit. And take care. Till next time, roll high and prosper.
Too right.